My name is Evelyn, and this is the story of how I destroyed my marriage, shattered my family, and lost everything I held dear, all because I thought I deserved more. The California sun streamed through the bedroom window, casting a golden glow across the rumpled sheets. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of my husband Nathan beside me. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of day that should have been filled with laughter, family outings, and stolen moments of intimacy. Instead, I felt a familiar emptiness gnawing at my insides. I turned my head to study Nathan's profile. Even in sleep, his brow was furrowed, the weight of his responsibilities etched into the lines of his face. He was a good man, a devoted father, a tireless provider. So why did I feel so unfulfilled? As if sensing my gaze, Nathan's eyes fluttered open. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, his eyes soft, a gentle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. But then reality set in, and the mask of the overworked, stressed executive slipped back into place. "Morning," he mumbled, reaching for his phone when the night stunned. "What time is it?" I sighed at the moment lost. "Just past 8. The kids are probably already up." Nathan nodded absently, his attention already captured by the endless stream of emails on his screen. I slipped out of bed, padding to the bathroom to start my day. As I stood under the hot spray of the shower, I let my mind wander back to the early days of our relationship. We met in college. Nathan, an ambitious business major, and me, the idealistic art student. It had been a whirlwind romance, full of passionate debates, stolen kisses between classes, and dreams of the life we'd build together. And for a while we'd lived that dream. Nathan's career took off, and I found success as a freelance graphic designer. We bought a beautiful house in a quiet Los Angeles suburb, and soon our family grew to include our daughter Sophia and our son Nathan. From the outside we were the perfect family, successful, attractive, enviable. But somewhere along the way things had changed. Nathan's work consumed him, the pressure to provide pushing him to longer hours and higher stress levels. And I felt like I was disappearing. No longer the vibrant, passionate woman I'd once been, but a shadow, Nathan's wife, Sophia, Nathan's mother, but no longer Evelyn. I stepped out of the shower, wiping the steam from the mirror. At 37 I was still beautiful, my dark hair falling in waves past my shoulders, my green eyes bright, my figure still turning heads. But the woman staring back at me looked tired, resigned. When was the last time Nathan had really looked at me? When was the last time he'd swept me into his arms, making me feel desired, cherished? Shaking off these thoughts, I dressed and headed downstairs. The sounds of cartoons and bickering children greeted me. "Mom, Ethan won't let me watch my show." Sophia, our 10-year-old drama queen, wailed from the living room. "It's my turn. You always hog the TV." Ethan, at 8, had mastered the art of the indignant whine. I took a deep breath, plastering on a smile as I entered the fray. "Okay kids, let's compromise. How about we turn off the TV and have a family breakfast instead?" Twin groans met my suggestion, but I stood firm. As I herded them into the kitchen, Nathan appeared, already dressed in a crisp button-down and slacks. "Going to the office?" I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. It was Saturday after all. Nathan nodded, pouring coffee into a travel mug. "Big presentation on Monday. I need to finalize some numbers." I bit back a retort, focusing instead on getting pancake batter mixed. "Will you be home for dinner at least?" He paused, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "I'll try, Evie. No promises though." And just like that he was gone, leaving me alone with 2 squabbling children and a simmering resentment that threatened to boil over. The weeks passed in a blur of routine. School drop-offs, client meetings, soccer practices, hurried family dinners on the rare nights Nathan made it home before the kids' bedtime. I tried to talk to him about how I was feeling, but the conversations always seemed to end the same way. "I'm doing this for us, Evelyn," Nathan would say, his voice tinged with frustration. "For our future, for the kids' college funds. Don't you understand that?" But I didn't understand. Not really. All I knew was that I felt lonely, unappreciated, invisible. And then came the invitation that would change everything. My college roommate, Melissa, was getting married in Houston. The thick cream envelope arrived on a Tuesday, Nathan's name conspicuously absent from the address. They probably assumed I wouldn't be able to make it, Nathan said when I showed him the invitation. And they're right. I've got a huge deal closing that weekend. There's no way I can get away. I nodded, unsurprised but still disappointed. I understand. I'll go alone then. It'll be nice to catch up with old friends. Nathan barely looked up from his laptop. Sure. Sounds good. Just let me know the dates so I can make sure I'm around for the kids. And so 3 weeks later I found myself on a plane to Houston. A mix of excitement and trepidation churning in my stomach. It had been years since I'd been away from my family, years since I'd been just Evelyn, not Mrs. Nathan Crawford, not Mom. The thought was both liberating and terrifying. The wedding was a lavish affair, held at a sprawling ranch just outside the city. As I mingled during the cocktail hour, glass of champagne in hand, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Evelyn? Evelyn Martinez? I turned, coming face to face with the ghost from my past. Marcus Delgado, the boy now very much a man, who'd been the subject of many late-night gossip sessions in my college dorm room. He'd only gotten more handsome with age, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at me. Marcus? Oh my God, it's been forever! I exclaimed, pulling him into a hug before I could overthink it. He laughed, a rich warm sound that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. You look amazing. Evie, the years have been kind to you. I felt a blush creep up my cheeks, unused to such direct compliments. You're not so bad yourself. What are you doing here? I didn't know you knew Melissa. I don't, not really, he admitted. I'm here as a plus one. But I'm glad I came. It's great to see a familiar face. As we fell into easy conversation, catching up on the years that had passed, I felt something stirring inside me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. Marcus was charming and attentive, handing him my every word, as if what I had to say was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. The ceremony passed in a blur, and soon the reception was in full swing. Marcus and I had barely left each other's side, our conversation flowing as easily as the champagne. As a slow song began to play, he held out his hand. Dance with me. I hesitated for a moment, my wedding ring suddenly feeling heavy on my finger. But the champagne unloosened my inhibitions, and the way Marcus was looking at me like I was the only woman in the room, was intoxicating. I took his hand, letting him lead me to the dance floor. As we swayed to the music, his hand on the small of my back, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. We were standing closer and it was strictly necessary, and I could feel the heat of his body, smell the subtle scent of his cologne. You know, Marcus murmured, his lips close to mine, here, I had the biggest crush on you in college. I pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze. Really? Why didn't you ever say anything? He shrugged, a rueful smile playing at his lips. You were always out of my league. And by the time I worked up the courage, you were with Nathan. The mention of my husband's name sent a jolt of guilt through me, but I pushed it aside. This was harmless, wasn't it? Just two old friends catching up. But as the night wore on and the drinks continued to flow, that line began to blur. We found ourselves in a quiet corner of the hotel bar, heads bent close together as we talked in low voices. I can't believe you're living in Lanao, I said, sipping my martini. Small world. Marcus leaned in closer, his voice low and intimate. Maybe it's not so small. Maybe it's fate. I should have pulled away. I should have said goodnight and gone back to my room alone. But in that moment, with the alcohol buzzing through my veins and Marcus looking at me like I was the most desirable woman in the world, I made a choice that would change everything. The next morning I woke up in Marcus' arms, a mix of exhilaration and crushing guilt washing over me. What had I done? As I quietly gathered my things and slipped out of his room, I told myself it was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness that would never be repeated. But life is rarely that simple. Back in Los Angeles, I tried to slip back into my routine, to be the perfect wife and mother. But thoughts of Marcus consumed me. And when he called a week later, saying he was in town for business and suggesting we meet for coffee, I found myself agreeing before I could think better of it. One coffee date turned into lunch, lunch into dinner, and soon I was living a double life. With Marcus I felt desired, appreciated, alive. At home, the distance between Nathan and me only grew. Months passed and I became an expert at lying. Every business trip, every girls' night out became an opportunity to see Marcus. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone, that what Nathan didn't know wouldn't hurt him. But deep down I knew I was on a collision course with disaster. It all came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I thought Nathan was supposed to be in a meeting, but he came home early, walking in on Marcus and me in our living room. The look of shock, hurt, and then rage on Nathan's face will haunt me for the rest of my life. "What the fuck is this?" He rolled, his face contorted with anger. I scrambled to my feet, adjusting my clothes. "Nathan." "I can explain." But there was no explaining. In a flash, Nathan was across the room, his fist connecting with Marcus's jaw with a sickening crack. I screamed, trying to pull them apart. But it was like trying to stop a freight train. Nothing. "Stop, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. But Nathan was beyond reason. Years of pent-up frustration, stress, and now betrayal fueled his rage. He tackled Marcus to the ground, rain blew down on him. "You son of a bitch!" Nathan yelled, his voice raw with pain. "In my house. With my wife." Marcus tried to defend himself, but he was no match for Nathan's fury. I could see blood streaming from his nose, his eyes already swelling shut. In desperation, I grabbed a vase from the side table and smashed it on the floor. The crash momentarily stunned both men, giving me a chance to wedge myself between them. "Nathan, please." I sobbed, my hands on his heaving chest. "Stop this. Think of the kids. Think of what you're doing." At the mention of our children, something seemed to snap Nathan out of his rage. He stumbled backward, looking from Marcus's battered form to me, his eyes wild with a mix of anger and despair. "Get out," he said, his voice deathly quiet. "Both of you get the fuck out of my house." Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to his feet, casting one last look at me before hurrying out the door. I stood there, trembling, facing the wreckage of my marriage. "Nathan," I started, reaching out to him. He recoiled from my touch as if it burned him. "Don't," he spat. "Don't you dare touch me." "How long, Evelyn? How long have you been fucking him?" I flinched at his words, at the raw pain in his voice. "It's not. It wasn't like that. It just happened." Nathan laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "It just happened." "What?" "You tripped and fell on his dick." "Don't insult my intelligence, Evelyn." "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling woefully inadequate. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "God, Evelyn, do you have any idea what you've done? To me? To our family?" The full weight of my actions came crashing down on me then. I sank to the floor, sobs racking my body. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. Please, can we talk about this? Can we try to fix this?" But Nathan was already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "That bastard trespassed in my home. And then I'm calling a lawyer." "A lawyer?" I code, fear ripping my heart. "Nathan, please, let's not do anything hasty." He looked at me, then really looked at me. And I saw nothing but cold determination in his eyes. "It's over, Evelyn. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." The next few hours passed in a blur of sirens, police questions, and hospital waiting rooms. Marcus had a concussion and a broken jaw. Nathan was questioned but released without charges. The police are sympathetic to a man defending his home and marriage. And me, I was left to face the wreckage of the life I'd so carelessly destroyed. The news spread like wildfire. Our phones rang off the hook with calls from family and friends, all expressing shock and disappointment. My parents, who had always been so proud of my perfect little family, could barely look at me when they came to visit. "How could you do this, Evelyn?" my mother asked, her voice quivering with emotion. "Don't you know what this will do to your children?" "The children? Oh God, the children." Telling Sophia and Nathan was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Their confusion, their tears, their anger. It was all because of me. Because I'd been selfish, because I'd wanted more. But why, Mommy? Sophia had asked, her big brown eyes filled with tears. Don't you love Daddy anymore? Of course I love Daddy. I tried to explain, my heart breaking. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes. Ethan, always more reserved, had simply stared at me with a mixture of confusion and betrayal that cut me to my core. The divorce proceedings were ugly. Nathan, fueled by hurt and betrayal, fought for full custody of the kids. His lawyer painted me as an unfit mother, a woman who'd put her own desires above her family's well-being. And the worst part was I couldn't even argue with that characterization. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the lawyer detail my infidelity, I caught sight of my reflection in a window. I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. How had I become this person? This liar, this cheater, this homewrecker? The judge's decision was like a punch to the gut. Nathan was granted primary custody, with me getting visitation every other weekend and some holidays. I'd lost my home, my family, and a large part of my identity, all in the span of a few months. After the divorce was finalized, I moved into a small apartment across town. The silence was deafening. No kids RVing over the TV remote, no Nathan typing away on his laptop. Just me and my thoughts, replaying every mistake, every bad decision that had led me to this point. Marcus tried to reach out a few times, but I couldn't bear to speak to him. Our affair had cost us both dearly, and the passion that had once felt so irresistible now left a bitter taste in my mouth. Rebuilding my life has been a slow, painful process. There are days when the guilt threatens to overwhelm me, when I can barely look at myself in the mirror, but I'm trying. I'm in therapy, working through my issues, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. My relationship with my children is strained, but I'm working on it. Every other weekend I try to make up for lost time. To show them that despite my mistakes, my love for them has never wavered. One Saturday, as I was helping Sophia with her homework, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of Nathan. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "do you think you and Dad will ever get back together?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I took a deep breath, trying to formulate an answer that wouldn't crush her hopes entirely. "Sweetie, I don't think that's going to happen, but I want you to know that both your dad and I love you and Nathan very much. That will never change." She nodded, her little face scrunched up in thought. "It's just, Molly's parents got divorced and then they got back together. I thought maybe." I pulled her into a hug, fighting back tears. "Oh honey, I'm so sorry. I know this is hard for you and Nathan. I wish I could make it better." As I held my daughter, I was hit with a fresh wave of guilt. My selfish actions hadn't just ruined my marriage, it shattered my children's sense of security and family. It was a weight I would carry for the rest of my life. Nathan and I communicate only about the kids now. The love and friendship we once shared have been replaced by cold civility. Sometimes when I'm dropping the kids off, I catch a glimpse of the life I used to have. The home I used to live in, the family I used to be part of. It's like looking through a window into a world I can no longer enter. One such day, as I was saying goodbye to the kids, Nathan caught my arm as I was turning to leave. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and serious. "We need to talk about Ethan. His teacher called. He's been acting out in class, getting into fights." I felt my heart sink. Ethan had always been such a sweet, quiet boy. Fighting? That doesn't sound like him at all. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "I know, I think he's having a hard time dealing with everything. Maybe we should consider getting him some counseling." I nodded, fighting back tears. "Of course, whatever he needs. I'm so sorry, Nathan. This is all my fault." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Nathan in his eyes, concerned, shared worry for our child. But then the shutters came down and he was once again the distant ex-husband. We both need to be there for him. That's all that matters now. As for Marcus, I heard he moved back to Texas. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks of me, if he regrets our affair as much as I do. But mostly I try not to think about him at all. The passion that had seemed so irresistible, so life-changing, now feels hollow and meaningless in the face of all I've lost. One day, about 6 months after the divorce, I ran into him at a coffee shop during a business trip to Houston. The sight of him sent a jolt through me, not of desire but of anger and regret. Evelyn, he said, his voice cautious. How are you? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No spark, no connection, just a dull ache for all that had been lost. I'm managing, I replied coolly. And you? He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. I'm okay. Listen, Evelyn, I wanted to apologize for everything. I never meant for things to go so far, to cause so much pain. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You never meant for things to go so far. That's rich, Marcus. We're both adults. We both made choices. Terrible, selfish choices. He flinched at my words. You're right. I'm sorry. I hope you're doing okay, that you're healing. I picked up my coffee, ready to walk away. Healing is a process, Marcus. One that I'm navigating on my own. Goodbye. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. That chapter of my life was truly over. Now I had to focus on moving forward, on being the best mother I could be, on finding a way to forgive myself. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs I ignored, all the times I could have made a different choice. If I could go back, I'd tell myself that no momentary passion is worth the pain and destruction that followed. I'd remind myself of the vows I made, of the family I was blessed with. But I can't go back. All I can do now is move forward, trying to be a better person, a better mother. I'm learning to live with the consequences of my actions, to find purpose and meaning in this new, smaller life I've created for myself. Some days are harder than others. There are moments where the loneliness feels crushing, when I give anything to go back to my old life. But then I remind myself that this is my reality now, and it's up to me to make the best of it. I've started volunteering at a local women's shelter, trying to channel my remorse into something positive. It's there that I met Sarah, a woman whose story of betrayal and loss mirrored my own in many ways. We formed a friendship based on mutual understanding and the shared experience of rebuilding a life from the ground up. You know, Sarah said to me one day as we were sorting donations, I used to think my life was over after my divorce. But now I realize it was just the beginning. We're more than our mistakes, Evelyn. Her words struck a chord in me. Yes, I had made a terrible mistake, one that had cost me dearly. But I was more than that mistake. I was still Evelyn. Flawed, human, but also capable of growth and change. As the months turned into years, I've slowly begun to rebuild my life. My relationship with my children has improved, though there are still moments of tension and unspoken hearts. Ethan's counseling has helped him work through his anger, and Sophie has become my fierce defender against the whispers and judgmental looks that still sometimes follow me. Nathan and I have found a way to co-parent civilly if not warmly. At Sophie's middle school graduation, we even managed to sit together, presenting a united front for our daughter's sake. As we watched her accept her diploma, beaming with pride, Nathan leaned over and whispered, "We did good with that one." For a moment, I was transported back in time, to when we were a family, sharing in our children's triumphs together. The nostalgia was bittersweet, a reminder of what I'd lost, but also of the good that still remained. I'm not sharing this story for sympathy or understanding. I made my choices and I'm living with the consequences. But if my experience can serve as a cautionary tale, if it can make even one person think twice before making the mistakes I did, then maybe some good can come from all this pain. So here I am, starting over at 41. A part-time mama divorcee, a woman trying to redefine herself in the wake of her biggest mistakes. It's not the life I imagined for myself, but it's the one I've got. And day by day I'm learning to live it, to find small joys where I can, and to never again take for granted the precious things in life. Trust, family, integrity. As I sit here in my small apartment, looking at photos of my kids on the mantle, I'm reminded of a quote I once read. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. It's not going to be easy, but I'm determined to build something meaningful from the rubble of my mistakes. Last week I had dinner with an old college friend, someone who knew me before I was Mrs. Nathan Crawford, before I was a mother, before the affair that changed everything. As we caught up over glasses of wine, she looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Are you happy, Evelyn?" she asked. "After everything that's happened, have you found peace?" I paused, considering her question carefully. Happy. I'm not sure that's the right word, but I'm content. I'm learning to live with my choices, to find purpose in my new life. And most importantly, I'm learning to like myself again. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You know, the Evelyn I knew in college wouldn't have given up. She would have seen this as a new beginning, a chance to reinvent herself. Her words stayed with me long after our dinner had ended. She was right. The old Evelyn, the one who had dreams and ambitions beyond being someone's wife and mother, was still in there somewhere. Maybe it was time to let her out again. The next day I dug out my old sketchbooks and art supplies. As I began to draw, tentatively at first, and then with growing confidence, I felt a spark of the old passion that had driven me in my college days. Maybe it was time to revisit that part of myself, to see where it might lead. This is my story, a story of love, betrayal, consequences, and hopefully eventually redemption. It's not pretty, it's not glamorous, but it's real. And if nothing else, I hope it serves as a reminder that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes it's only when we lose everything that we realize how much we had to begin with.
Now start second story.
My name is Luke. My wife Lily and I have been married for 15 years, and we have 2 wonderful preteen daughters who still adore their dad. I see myself as a confident and assertive man who doesn't put up with nonsense. I treat my wife with a lot of care because she's very special to me. I support her being confident and taking charge, but only up to a certain point. I'm 6 feet 6 inches tall and weigh 265 pounds of muscle, thanks to my dad's genes. I have a strong presence, but I'm actually gentle unless someone provokes me. Lily has seen this side of me a few times, especially when we've been out and some rough guys tried to approach her. Lily is very attractive with curves, long legs, a slim waist and a beautiful face. Men often stare and flirt with her, which annoys me. One of my flaws is jealousy, and when it comes up it's hard to control. I've worked on managing my anger over the years, but haven't fully mastered it yet. Lily has seen me get jealous twice in our 15 years together, and knows what I can do. Both times were when we were out and some rude guys tried to make her dance with them after she said no and told them she was with me. They ignored her and tried to pull her out of her seat right in front of me. I guess they thought that because they looked tough, I would just let them take my wife. They were wrong. The first time it happened, we were having a nice time talking about our daughters when a guy grabbed her hand and tried to pull her away. I immediately got up and stood between him and my wife before he could take her to the dance floor. In a swift move, I dislocated his shoulder and guided him back into our booth, where he writhed in pain. Lily and I then swiftly left the scene. Like I mentioned, I don't tolerate disrespect from anyone, and my main challenge is dealing with jealousy. This situation raises a question. Since she knows my nature, why would she allow this to happen? Even with my suspicions, my feelings for her hadn't wavered. Several unusual things were unfolding that hadn't been present during our 15 years of marriage. Triggering my intuition, her outfits and appearance underwent significant changes when the new boss took over at the office, and our intimate life suddenly took a positive turn with her now taking the initiative, a behavior she hadn't exhibited before. There was a surge in late-night text messages and more frequent late work meetings. Naturally, she had plausible explanations for everything, but my innate jealousy wasn't put at ease. For some reason, I instructed the private investigation firm not to share any information with me until they had completed their investigation. I hoped that I was just being an overly suspicious husband, and I didn't want things to change between us. After 3 months of investigation, I received a folder containing the news I had been trading. I reviewed the video, audio, and photos, and then I informed my attorney Mac to proceed with the divorce papers and have them ready for me by Wednesday afternoon. My plan was to surprise them on their Thursday night date. While they believed I was out of town, I had something special in mind for the couple. It still surprised me how she could have thought she'd get away with this. Lily knows me better than anyone. She's aware of my intuition, determination, and how unforgiving I can be. She witnessed my ruthlessness when I took over the company and decisively dealt with competitors. I now have a controlling interest in a sizable trucking company, and I've earned respect from truckers and teamsters, treating them fairly, and I know they would support me if I ever needed them. I'd given Lily everything and always treated her exceptionally well, as if she were royalty, and she's fully aware of it. She praises me to her family, sharing how wonderful I am and how I shower her with care, which she loves. Despite all this, a question keeps echoing in my mind, especially during these last few hours. Why? Why would she risk everything she has for a fleeting affair? Why would she jeopardize our relationship for a fling with her boss? Be a fair, why indeed? This is the most troubling question for me. Lily had always been a great mother and a loving wife, which is why this situation was so hard to understand. Our intimate life was active and satisfying, though apparently not satisfying enough. She managed the household duties while also working full-time as an executive assistant at a local tech company. I never thought she would have an affair. Thursday night, the date I had planned was coming up. I had everything set up and one of my trusted contacts was with me to hand over the folder. I arrived early, tipped the hostess well and asked for a more private table for them. My clever wife thought I was away on a trip. On the audio recording, I overheard her telling her boss that she was available Thursday night if he still wanted to meet up. Naturally, this guy eagerly agreed and offered to plan everything. The private investigator agency had equipped me with software to install on Lily's phone, allowing me to obtain copies of her text messages and emails. This software also featured an audio recording function that could upload via a private server. On a Monday, I received a copy of the text he had sent to Lily, detailing the time he'd pick her up, the restaurant for their reservations, and the directive for her to dress provocatively for him. I was seething with anger after reading this, realizing how my soon-to-be ex-wife was behaving, not to mention the audacity of this guy to pick her up in our home. My plan was relatively straightforward. I would wait for the lovers to settle in with their initial drink. Then I would appear suddenly. That's when my performance would start, culminating in a subtle threat and the unexpected presentation of the divorce papers. My anger and thirst for revenge were growing stronger in my heart. I knew Lily wouldn't desire a divorce, because she truly loved me and our children. However, I was fully aware that what I was about to do would devastate her and alter her life forever. But at that moment I didn't care. All I wanted was for her to experience some of the pain she had inflicted on me, especially for the sake of the children in our 15-year marriage. But did I mention that I'm a somewhat immature, jealous alpha male? There was no way I was going to tolerate another man being with my wife, only to keep her as my devoted partner. As much as I loved her and as much as it hurt, I knew I could never view or touch her in the same way again. I had both surveillance and support on standby, ready to inform me at the right moment. I received the signal that the couple was seated and had their drinks. I was prepared to confront them directly. Leaving my car, I entered the restaurant and exchanged a smile with the hostess. Taking a deep breath, I locked away my anger and proceeded with my plan. The couple was seated at their table, and it was painful to see my beautiful wife wearing a provocative cocktail dress highlighting her ample cleavage. This really angered me, especially because she had never dressed that way for me. I was puzzled and frustrated by this behavior. Why would she do this to me? It made no sense and was driving me crazy. It seemed like she wanted to look good for her boyfriend that night, which made me even angrier. I approached their table quietly from the side, and they didn't notice me because they were so focused on each other. It was quite a romantic scene. They only noticed me when I pulled a chair from a nearby table. The look on Lily's face was indescribable, a mix of surprise, fear, and guilt that I'd never seen before. Her date didn't realize who I was and just looked at me with an annoyed expression. I started with, "Hey Lily, enjoying your date night?" and gave a big smile. She responded smoothly, "Hey there, what brings you here? I thought you were away tonight. My boss, Jeremy, asked me to have dinner to discuss some organizational changes. Why don't you join us?" She spoke in a calm, affectionate tone. I had to give her credit. She was composed and quick-thinking. The drink I'd ordered before approaching the table arrived, and after brushing off Lily's lies, I raised a toast. I offered a friendly smile and said, "Let's raise our glasses for a little toast. Here's to an interesting night in new directions." After my toast, I turned to her boss with a smile. "Jeremy, do you know what's kept Lily and Neapoli married for 15 years? Honesty and trust. Plain and simple. Are you married, Jeremy?" I already had all the information about him from the report. "Yes, I've been married for 20 years, and I have 4 amazing kids ranging from 5 to 13 years old." "I agree with you." Luke, trust and honesty are crucial in our marriage too, Jeremy added. That's great to hear, Jeremy. Lily, do you share the same? I asked, fully aware that I was putting her in a tight spot. Yes, sweetheart, it's definitely a significant factor in our marriage, she confidently affirmed. After all, she had just mentioned that they were having a business dinner, so there was no reason for her to feel guilty or anxious. You see, Jeremy, our marriage is strong and Lily knows how much I care for her and how far I go for her as long as she remains faithful. I observed them both squirm a bit as I took another sip from my glass. I kept playing the game. So how long have you guys been seeing each other? I asked casually, sporting a big grin. Lily seemed irritated, tried to regain control and sounded defensive. Honey, this is a business meeting, and you're making things uncomfortable with my boss. Please don't let your jealousy hit the best of you. You know me better than that. Following Lily's lead, her date seized the chance to put me in my place. Indeed, Luke, this is purely a business dinner. I needed to discuss some upcoming changes, and that's why I met with Lily tonight. I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. My friend, I would never cross professional boundaries, especially with a married woman. I tried to seem apologetic and said, "Oh, I'm sorry." So, you're saying you've never taken my wife out on a date, and this is just a business dinner? He assured me. You're right, Luke, there's absolutely nothing going on between us. I then asked Lily, Lily, is that true? This is purely a business meeting, and nothing has happened between you two before. This question would decide our future. Truth or deception? I already had a feeling about the answer before she even spoke. Absolutely, darling. It's only business meetings. I would never be involved with another man, especially not my own boss. Please don't act so immature. Lily protested. I apologized. Jeremy, my husband can be a bit jealous, but he knows how much I love him. She continued, lowering her head and playing the submissive role. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I do tend to get a little jealous. I mean, seeing you in that attractive dress out with this handsome man, you can understand why I might feel this way. Right. Jeremy gave her a friendly pat on the back, visibly relieved that she seemed to have fooled me. Look, no need to apologize. Well, I'm not sure how I'd react. With tensions eased, I signaled the man observing us from the bar. He approached our table, and as he handed me a thick folder, he swiftly departed. Everyone's attention shifted to him, and curious glances were exchanged between Lily and Jeremy. I began to lay out photos from the folder on the table. Just before placing the first photo down, I turned to Lily and spoke softly in a melancholic Lily. You know I loved you with all my heart and was ready to give you everything, but you've discarded that love along with all the years of our marriage. You've hurt me deeply, and I'll never be able to forget those videos and the hurtful things you said about me on those recordings. Those memories will haunt me for the rest of my life. Thanks for that. I placed down the first 8 by 10 inches photo, revealing Lily on her knees with Jeremy. The next picture showed him finishing on her face, and then there were several more showing them in different but positions. Lily gasped in shock and covered her mouth with her hands. Jeremy was angry and demanded to know where I got the photos. I told him to be quiet. As I arranged the photos, I took my time looking at each one and making comments like, Lily, you look quite alluring with that in your mouth, and Jeremy, you seem pretty satisfied in this picture. Looks like you're enjoying my wife. Lily started crying and begging me to stop. Other diners began to notice, so I tried to keep my voice down to avoid disturbing the whole restaurant. Lily realized how terrible the situation seemed, and she saw only one way out. I'm really sorry, baby. Can we please just leave and talk about what happened? It's not as it seems, she pleaded. I looked at her with a slightly amused expression and asked slowly, not as it seems. Are you going to keep lying to me, being deceitful? But let me stop you right there. Both of you should know that I've got hours of video, audio, text messages, emails, and photos. Lately, I have to admit, after seeing those videos, I never knew that side of you existed, that you could act in such a way. You never revealed that part of yourself to me, and that's painful. I've spent a lot of money in the past 3 months to gather this information, and it's all legally obtained. So trust me, I understand it all. As I put away the documents, I explained, now let me clarify why I'm here and what's going to happen tonight. I handed Lily the divorce papers and told her, Lily, it's over between us. You and I are finished. Your relationship with your boyfriend has ruined our marriage and my love for you. You've caused me a level of pain I've never felt before, and I won't be with you anymore. You'll sign this tonight. And my colleague at the bar is a notary who will witness your signature. If you don't sign tonight, I'll expose all the videos and audio to your parents. Our friends and your kids will learn about the kind of mother you've been. I've been fair in this divorce, but the girls will stay with me. There's no way my daughters will live with a cheating, disrespectful person like you. Jeremy, my buddy, I'd strongly recommend you get your girlfriend here to sign this before I walk out that door. Otherwise, I'll make sure to hand over all the evidence to your wife and the higher-ups at your workplace. By the time I'm done, your job will be gone and I'll be persuading your wife, Sarah, to give you the boot and make sure you're financially ruined for a good while. I really don't want to go down that path. So just work on getting her to sign those divorce papers. After this, you can have my soon-to-be ex-wife. I want nothing to do with her ever again. My words hit her hard, and the thought of losing her daughters was too much for her. Tears ran down her face and her boyfriend looked panicked. Lily begged me to stop and reconsider, saying the usual things like, it's not what it looks like. Let me explain. I'll make it right. It was just a mistake. Please forgive me. Blah blah blah. She ended by saying, Luke, I love you and I don't want this. Please give me one more chance. Ignoring her pleas, I got up and announced, I'm heading to the restroom, and when I return, those papers should be signed. If they're not, I promise you won't even grasp the level of chaos I'll unleash into your lives. I left Lily in tears and her lover in shock. He knew Jeremy would do whatever it took to get her to sign those papers and save his own skin. During my absence, Jeremy acted swiftly. He understood that he couldn't afford to let his wife and his job see those videos, and he was determined to do whatever it took to avoid that scenario. He needed to persuade Lily to put her signature on the divorce papers, and he spoke up. Lily, just sign them for now, then ask him to hold on to them for a week. That'll give you a chance to talk and convince him of your love. Promise to go to therapy, do whatever it takes, but make him wait a week. Tell him it's the least he can do after 15 years of marriage for one mistake. It's our best shot right now. I can tell he's serious, and if he has those videos and audio recordings, we're both in trouble. I don't want a divorce, he said. Lily cried out. Believe me, if you get him to wait, I'm confident you can salvage your marriage. Think about our kids. You wouldn't want to lose them, right? Tears welled up again, and after a few moments I returned to the table. So, have you put your signature on those papers yet? With the most sorrowful expression I'd ever witnessed, she locked eyes with me and said, Honey, I'll do whatever you want, including signing these papers, but could you please give me a week before you make any final decisions? Can you let me come back home with you and give me some time? After 15 years together, can I have 1 week to be with our daughters and talk? Please give me that chance. I stayed silent, looking into her eyes and thinking about her request. Finally I said, even though you deserve my anger for what you've done and how you've ruined our marriage for this guy, I'll give you that. You can come back home, and I'll give you 1 week before I give the paperwork to my lawyer. You'll stay in one of the guest bedrooms. I don't want you near my bed during this time. Now go ahead and sign them so I can get out of here. She put her signature on the papers and I placed them into the folder. I stood up, ready to leave. Before I walked away, I took her hand in mine, and she smiled momentarily until she realized I was taking off her wedding rings. I tucked them into my pocket, and then removed the ring I had worn for our 15-year marriage. I held it up, catching her gaze, and nonchalantly tossed it into her glass of wine. The expression on her face gave me a tiny bit of satisfaction. When her tears started flowing again, I couldn't help but smile slightly, knowing she was beginning to understand my pain. I turned to Jeremy and said, Well, you jerk. She's all yours now. Do whatever you please with her. I'm leaving, but remember this. Jeremy, you messed around with my wife, destroyed our marriage, and put so much at risk, including my children's perception of their mother. Your fate is in my hands, and I'm holding your future. Don't mess with me. You're lucky I didn't follow through with my original plans for you. This isn't the end between us, you scumbag. You'll be hearing from me soon. Got it? Jeremy nodded quietly as I stood, towering over him. It seems I may have thrown a wrench in their evening plans. I wonder if they're still in the mood for their little escapade after I'm gone. As I began to leave, Lily grabbed onto my arm and pleaded, "Can I please come back home with you? I just want to be with you. Please?" I pulled my arm away as if it had been burned and retorted, "Screw you. I don't want to be seen with you. You're his plaything tonight. I'll see you after he's done using you, whether it's tonight or tomorrow. Doesn't matter to me anyway. You have 1 week. You disgust me and I'm ashamed to have ever been your husband." All right. Yes, I was being a jerk. But honestly, I didn't give a damn. I felt like I had kept my jealousy and anger under control. I was proud that I managed to suppress all that pent-up rage. I gave her a week and we'll see what happens. The next morning I heard her come home about an hour later. To her credit, she went straight to the guest room, probably knowing I wasn't in the mood for a calm conversation. We crossed paths in the kitchen the following morning. As I came down for coffee, still feeling vengeful, I kept my attitude and said, "Good morning. How's my unfaithful wife doing today?" She flinched and looked down at her coffee, then said the typical words every cheating wife uses when caught and desperate to save the marriage. "Honey, we need to talk." I replied, "There's no need to talk about this. Lily, I know what you've been up to. I know how long you've been doing it. I know everything you told him about me and our marriage. I saw you doing things with him that you never did with me. I saw how you dressed to impress him. I know he's apparently more impressive. I heard that countless times in those videos. You lied, hid things, cheated, and made me look like a fool. I can't believe you were that foolish. If I'm overlooking something, then we can talk. Otherwise, I've got nothing to say. The fool's me, not you. I don't know why I let it happen. You gave me everything I ever wanted, and I love you no matter what you heard in those videos. You need to know that hurting you was never my intention, and I never wished for you to find out." She managed to say amidst her tears, "That's exactly the issue, Lily. You never wanted me to find out. You wanted to keep it hidden and keep lying and sneaking around with your lover behind my back. That's the real issue here. Lily, I can forgive infidelity. We're all human and make mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. You chose this and you intended to keep it hidden and continue lying, cheating, and keeping your relationship concealed. I do love you. Lovey. But like Tina Turner sings, what's love got to do with it? My trust is shattered, and I'm questioning if I ever truly knew you. How many other men were there? How many times did you sleep with your lover, and then come back to our bed with his traces? I'm utterly disgusted. I can barely even talk." I shared, my voice heavy with emotion. Now sobbing, she finally grasped the weight of what I was feeling and comprehended the enormity of her actions. She had no justifications or excuses left, only an admission of her wrongdoings. "All right, I admit it, and I'm filled with self-disgust. There was no one else involved, and I know no matter what I say, you won't be able to forgive me for what I've done. But I don't want us to get divorced. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to save our relationship. I think I need therapy, and maybe we can go together to figure out what's wrong with me. Please don't leave me." I paused before responding. "Lily, you can definitely go to counseling. Work on yourself and I'll support you. But I can't be with someone who could so easily throw me away. Your actions and words have shown me how you really feel, and I can't imagine living with someone who has those feelings toward me. I'm aware there are other women out there who would value being with me. You had your opportunity and you let it slip away. Take this week to spend time with the girls and find a way to explain your departure to them. I won't speak ill of you, but you must be honest with them about why you're leaving. In our divorce agreement, I granted you complete access to the girls whenever you want, but they'll primarily live with me. If you continue behaving recklessly and setting a poor example for them, I'll have to make your visits more challenging. Understand, I'll treat you better than you might deserve, and I'll help you maintain your relationship with the girls. However, I have 2 questions I need answers to. Listen to my questions carefully and contemplate before responding. First, why did you risk everything for this? My second question, was it worth it? I then called Jeremy the next Monday and arranged to meet him for lunch on Wednesday. After he convinced me it was a good idea to meet up. I expressed my frustration to Jeremy about how he wrecked my marriage and how close he came to facing severe consequences. Then I laid out my alternative plan for him. Over lunch, I talked to him about the impact of his actions on many people due to his involvement with a married woman. I shared my expectations for him to make things right. Part of this involved him covering Lily's rent and car payments for the next 3 years. I believed he should experience some discomfort for what he did and detailed how this plan would operate. I'll send you the payment details for you to set up automatic transfers. This is your form of punishment, and believe me, you're getting off lightly. Even though I'm done with my cheating wife, I still care for her and want her to be looked after. You will comply with my terms. This arrangement will help Lily get back on her feet after I kick her out. I don't care how you manage it, but if you don't follow through, I'll ensure you lose your job and your wife. Sarah learns about your affair. As a bonus, you get to stay alive. This is all because you had to involve yourself with a married woman. Jerks like you need to realize there are consequences for your actions. Instead of wrecking families, why not pursue single women? Your actions were truly terrible. Jeremy, I treated Lily decently, letting her see the kids and keep their relationship, but my respect and trust were never fully restored. Jeremy continued making the monthly payments, always mindful of my threat. Lily struggled to explain why she did what she did. She admitted that her cheating and lying weren't worth it and regretted her choices, but she couldn't say why she did it. Now she lives alone without a boyfriend and without the love she once had. I could have completely destroyed her, but losing her family and my love was punishment enough. Even though she went to counseling, she never figured out why she did it. The best she could come up with was, I don't know why. It just happened. It wasn't about you or our marriage. I genuinely loved you and was happy with our life together. It was just something new and exciting. I messed up. I couldn't stop myself. I asked her, Lily, if you were happy, why did you dress provocatively and wear sexy outfits for him? Why did you do things for him that you never did for me? If you had put that effort into our relationship, we might not be in this situation. It just happened and there isn't a real answer. You kept doing it and dressed to excite him every time. Even though you said you loved me. I hope one day you can give me a real explanation. Second story. Here's some context. I've been with my husband since 1999 and we have one adult son. When I got pregnant, we both agreed I would stay home to raise our son, because we didn't want him growing up in a broken home like we did. I gave up my career to do this and I don't regret it. However, my husband has been cheating since our son was about a year old, which is since 22. In 2016, I confronted him with proof I had gathered over the years, including evidence of hundreds of women. During this time he isolated me from my family and friends, so now I have no one to turn to or call. He has made sure I have no support in my life. Every year since then he has been good for a couple of months after I confronted him. But then he starts talking to other women again. Recently I saw messages from other women, including one saying, I love you too, baby, sweet dreams, 3 days ago. I confronted him about it today. We had agreed in 2016 that he would stop cheating, but it keeps happening. I end up forgiving him and having to confront him about other women every 6 months or so. Today I told him I'm done. We're finished. But I have no job. He made sure of that. No money, no car, no friends, and no family except my son, who has special needs. How do I escape this toxic marriage? I have no one to talk to or ask for help. Since I live in Alaska, I can't just drive to my family in the lower 48. What should I do? I need guidance and help.
Now start second story.
I'm Chris Harrington, the 48-year-old son and fourth child of Carl, a corporate attorney, and Mary, a nurse. An earthquake-sized tremor nearly destroyed our family home when, at the end of my junior year of high school, I announced that I didn't want to attend college. My normally talkative parents were initially stunned into silence, and then proceeded to make my life miserable. College was expected for the Harrington children, but Mom and Dad went behind my back and applied to 6 very good colleges and universities. I was accepted to all of them, which increased the pressure on my entire family to attend except for my paternal grandfather, Pops Harrington. I had been working with my grandfather during my vacation since I was 13. Pops flipped houses long before the term flipped was used. He would buy a rundown home, usually owned by a long-retired couple, completely renovate and update it, and then sell it for handsome profit. During the spring semester leading up to my junior year of high school, Pops helped me buy 2 fixer-upper houses. I spent the summer lining up contractors, electricians, plumbers, and painters, and making sure the work was done properly. 2 days before Labor Day, the unofficial end of summer, I sold the second house. While my friends spent the summer working minimum wage jobs, I split the profits with Pops and earned almost $8,000. I flipped 3 houses the following summer. Pops insisted that I find my own financing, although he agreed to co-sign the notes. At the end of the summer, I gave Pops 25% of my profit, and was left with a bundle of cash that would choke the average 17-year-old. Although I was an above-average student and enjoyed learning, I knew college wasn't for me. I eventually came to a truce with Mom and Dad. We agreed that I would take a year off after graduating high school but would need to reapply to colleges, and as a family we would decide if I would attend the following year. While my friends worked part-time summer jobs and prepared for their first year of college, I bought a used Ford F-150 pickup truck with 123,000 miles, a primitive cell phone, and started Harrington construction. I contacted every real estate agent who would talk to me and explain the type of houses I was interested in purchasing. I committed to using them as the buying agent when I bought a home they recommended, and as the selling agent when the renovations were complete. That's how I met the Kelly sisters. Jan and Mickey were in their mid-20s and relatively new agents who had recently started in real estate after finishing college. They were associates in a local franchise of a top national firm. I was currently overseeing the 2 homes when I got a call. "Hello Chris, this is Mickey Kelly. I found a house in West Hartford that looks like it meets your requirements. Would you like to see it?" The biggest lesson I learned from Pops was urgency. If an opportunity presented itself, I needed to be prepared to take advantage of it. I agreed to meet Mickey in 90 minutes. The house was a modest ranch which I estimated was built 50 years earlier. Mickey told me that it was owned by the estate of an elderly couple who had lived in the house for nearly 35 years. Their children lived on the West Coast and were looking to dump the house and settle the estate as quickly as possible. The house was in excellent structural shape but was run down and in need of a great deal of updating. "What do you think they'll take?" I asked Mickey. "I think it will go pretty quickly and we might come close to the $889,000 asking price." I suspected she was right. "I'll offer $85,500 cash. I want 5 days to complete the due diligence process and will close within 5 days of the inspector's report, assuming there aren't any problems." Mickey was thrilled. We went back to her office, wrote and signed the offer and sent it to the listing agent. The offer was accepted, the inspector's report came back without any surprises, and we closed on the deal 1 week later. "Let's celebrate," Mickey suggested as we left the attorney's office after the deal was complete. "I share an apartment with my sister. It's less than 2 miles away. Let's go have a drink." I followed Mickey into her nicely decorated 3rd-floor apartment at the edge of downtown West Hartford. She let me open a bottle of Merlot and pour 2 glasses. We silently toasted and each took a sip. "I hope you don't mind if we celebrate in other ways," Mickey said. Pops had taught me a great deal about the real estate business, including the fact that female agents were often grateful to work with contractors who might buy and sell multiple houses in a year. He often said if I were younger and wasn't married to grandma, I'd take full advantage of any bonus they offered. Mickey leaned in and kissed my lips. When she pulled back and saw the smile on my face, she leaned back in and pushed her tongue into my mouth. It was a very aggressive kiss. I held my wine glass in one hand and slid my hand down Mickey's back, patting her small, round, athletic bum and pulling her against me. We kissed and groped for a few minutes before Mickey backed away. She handed me her glass of wine and with an ear-to-ear smile we had wild sex. After that, I was only 18. Although I'd had a fair amount of sex, most experiences were fumbling and ultimately unsatisfying backseat romps with high school dates. I'd also become friends with benefits with 3 real estate agents, including a 43-year-old married woman who I credit with teaching me most of my sexual skills. Mickey, on the other hand, was amazing in her own way. I did have an affair with Mickey's sister Jazz, who was also amazing. The next 5 years flew by. When I showed my parents my financial information after the first year, they agreed that I was doing very well. They were disappointed that I wasn't going to college but could see my passion for the real estate business and supported me 100%. Starting my second full year in business, I was flipping a dozen to 15 houses a year. I was also actively looking for apartment buildings with 6 to 12 units. I'd fix each unit as tenants left and hold onto the property for the rental income. I quickly discovered that managing rental property was a royal pain in the ass. Not wanting to receive calls at 3 a.m. about broken toilets, I hired a real estate management company to handle my rental properties and all the associated problems. Mickey and Jen both got married within 2 months of each other. I was invited to both weddings and assumed that our playdates, including several threesomes with the sisters, were a thing of the past. I was 24 years old when Mickey and Jen invited me to dinner with their husbands. Their younger sister, Kate, was a recent college graduate and had been teaching at a Hartford area elementary school for 1 year. Kate had gone to school on a swimming scholarship and was stunning. She was taller than her sisters, standing at 5 feet 9 inches, weighing 135 pounds, with red hair and hazel eyes. Her athletic build was highlighted by long, trim legs and the most gorgeous hips ever. Even better than her physical appearance was her personality. She was smart, genuine, and had an easy laugh. I had a ball getting to know her over drinks and dinner, even though we were with her sisters and their husbands. I was thrilled when she agreed to let me drive her home to her parents' house at the end of the evening. We were approaching a Dunkin' Donuts shop when Kate suggested we stop and talk since it was the first time we were alone. After getting our drinks, we found a table that afforded us a little privacy. "Listen," Kate started, "you seem like a nice guy, and under different circumstances I think I'd like to get to know you." "I'd like to get to know you too. What are your concerns? I know you've been friends with my sisters for a few years and I know they're 30-something. I'm pretty sure they cheat on their husbands. How does that affect you and me? I won't ask if you've ever slept with either of them," Kate continued, "but if we dated, even if we went exclusive, you can't date my sisters." "Deal." I agreed. "You also need to know that I'm not a 30-something. I'm far from being a virgin, but I've only had sex with guys I'm exclusive with. It's not that many men. Kate and I started dating when I asked her out for the 4th time. I invited her to my home for a private dinner, and I was thrilled when she agreed. I picked her up at her folks' house, and I think she was shocked when I pulled into the parking area behind my home. I no longer lived in a condominium. Pops and Grandma Harrington had died within 3 weeks of each other 4 years earlier. They were incredibly generous to their children and grandchildren, leaving substantial properties from Pop's lifetime work. I inherited their old farmhouse on 73 acres in a small rural town just 20 minutes from Hartford. The acreage was filled with fruit trees, fruit bushes, and vegetables. The land was leased to a local farmer, and the income from the lease allowed me to support the property without investing my own money. It took me almost a year to decide to renovate the 30-year-old farmhouse and barn and another 2 years to finish the project. When it was complete, I owned a beautiful home. The outside was neat as a pin, and kept the distinct look of an old traditional farmhouse. The inside had been gutted and several walls were removed, giving the house a modern, open look. I'd also renovated the barn, pouring a concrete floor and converting it into a giant garage and storage area. The back corner was turned into a gym, and the second floor loft was converted into a modern office, now home to Harrington Real Estate and Construction. In truth, the office was my man cave. My company only had one employee, me. I bought, renovated, and either sold the property or rented it. I subcontracted all the renovations and hired real estate agents, attorneys, finance experts, and accountants. I was a one-man show. Kate was impressed when I gave her the grand tour. I think she was also impressed with the lasagna, asparagus, and salad I served for dinner. We ate on my backyard patio, drank wine, and talked until the candles burned out. "Can I ask you something?" I said. Kate nodded and said, "Sure. I'm enjoying getting to know you and I want to spend more time with you." I continued. "I don't have any interest in dating anyone but you. Would you consider being exclusive?" The smile on Kate's face slowly disappeared and I was crushed when she said, "I need to think about it." Slowly, the smile returned. She laughed and said, "I've thought about it long enough. It's about damn time you asked." She jumped into my lap and kissed me. It took nearly 45 minutes to make it to my king-size bed on the second floor of the house. We slowly kissed, touched, and undressed each other the entire time. When we finally fell onto the mattress, wrapped in a hug, I was the happiest man alive. I'll admit that my only concern was that I might compare Kate to her sisters and be disappointed in the quality of sex. After a very exhausting night that included both sex and making love, I knew I'd found the right sister. She loved sex just as much as her sisters but wanted an exclusive relationship. Shortly after, Kate and I got engaged. Her dad called and asked if we could meet for a beer. Her parents and I were friendly, but we didn't completely click. I knew the reason: I didn't have a college education. George and I met the next day, and as usual he got right to the point. "Chris, I like you a lot, but I think it's important that you and Kate sign a prenuptial agreement. Have you talked to Kate about it?" George answered, "Not yet, but I will." He pushed a manila folder across the table and continued, "I had my lawyer put this together. The prenup was only 2 pages and basically stated that in the case of divorce for any reason, Kate and I would keep all the assets we brought into the marriage. Kate would keep all acquired assets from her current job and any future jobs, and I would keep all the assets from my business. In case we had children, the court would set all child support payments, and we would each be required to pay $5,000 a year into a college fund. It seemed fair and straightforward. I told George, "I don't see any problems, but let me have my attorney take a look at it. I'll have it back to you within a week." Kate and I were married at the end of her second school year, and we took a 2-week honeymoon vacation to several Caribbean islands. While on vacation, we conceived a honeymoon baby, and Kay was born 9 months after our wedding. Our second daughter, Kara, arrived 16 months later, followed by the baby, Carla, 2.5 years after. Life was mostly good. In addition to her teaching responsibilities, Kate went back to school for her master's degree in education along with a certification to be a school administrator. It was a rough 3 years, and it always seemed that Kate and I were going in opposite directions. My business was doing well. With advancements on the internet, I was able to shift the direction of my company. I got out of the renovation side of the real estate business and instead used online access to search for distressed vacation properties along the northeast coastline and in ski country in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. When I found an appealing property, I conducted the usual due diligence, bought the property, and immediately sold it to someone who wanted to renovate it. In real estate terms, this type of transaction is known as a wholesale flip. I obviously wouldn't make as much money on each flip, but instead of 12 to 15 regular flips a year, I was completing 75 to 100 wholesale flips. I continued to invest in residential apartments, and currently own 18 buildings with a total of 124 units. Because I had an above-average reputation within a challenging industry, I also became a partner in an investment group that loaned money to flippers. It was one of the top companies of its kind in the Northeast. The most interesting part of the change in direction for me and my companies was that the amount of time I worked on a daily basis dropped. Instead of 60-hour work weeks, including traveling from renovation project to renovation project and locating new projects, my new responsibilities required between 20 and 30 hours per work week. I was able to devote more of my precious time to my family. An average workday consisted of getting up at 4 a.m. and exercising for an hour. I'd get my loving wife and kids up to the smell of a formal breakfast every morning, and have a healthy homemade lunch prepared for them to take with them. I kissed my wife and kids goodbye and watched the kids catch the school bus each morning. From 7:30 until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I attended work. I touched base with all of my real estate contacts looking for new wholesale flips, read the reports on our loan company, and completed 1,000 small details necessary in my line of work. Most days I was able to quit work in the early afternoon, get ready for the kids' after-school activities, coach their sports teams, take them to dance class, make sure their homework was complete, and bring them home to a healthy, home-cooked dinner. I was the happiest man in the world. I had a successful career and was proudly Mr. Mom. During the same time frame, Kate changed careers. She left the classroom and became a school administrator. She started as a middle school vice principal, moved to an elementary school as principal, then to a high school vice principal, and finally, in 6 short years, became our school systems assistant superintendent. The biggest downside was that while my work hours decreased, Kate's increased. She was required to attend many evening sporting events and other school activities. She went to all town council and board of education meetings. However, Kate loved her work and the positive difference she made in our town, so I refused to complain. Instead, I gladly picked up the slack at home. Even with our complicated lifestyle, Kate and I made time to be together, both in and out of the bedroom. As we passed our 12th anniversary, Kate and I were having sex 3 or 4 times every week. The only real challenge to our relationship started a number of years earlier. During our 3rd year of marriage, Kate and I were celebrating Valentine's Day at our favorite local restaurant. We had just started dessert when Kate said, "I'd like to ask you something, and I'd like you to keep an open mind." I'll admit that I was a little annoyed at her words and tone, and I responded, "When have I ever been closed-minded with you?" Kate rolled her eyes and said, "I just think there's a small chance that you'll get upset. So, after making reservations at our favorite restaurant and giving you a diamond pendant to celebrate Valentine's Day, you decide that it's a good time to talk about something that might upset me? Great. Go ahead." "Oh, for Christ's sake, Chris," Kate said, "I said there was a small chance you'd get upset." I waved before Kate could continue her rant. "Just tell me what you want to talk about." Kate stared at me for close to a minute before she continued. "Mickey and Jan have been going on a 5-day cruise every spring. We've picked a cruise during my school spring break. I'd like to go this year." I laughed and said, "Why in the world would that upset me? It sounds like a great idea. Where are we going?" Kate's initial smile turned to concern as she said, "No, you don't understand. We're planning a girls' week away." My eyes never left Kate's as I reached for my wine glass and took 2 small sips. After placing the glass back on the table, I asked, "What exactly are you asking me?" Kate looked bewildered and said, "I don't understand your question. You started this conversation by asking me if you could ask me a question. What's your question, Kate? What are you asking me?" Kate took a moment to collect herself and said, "Well, I guess I'm asking if you're okay with me going." My smile grew as I responded, "That's easy. No, I'm not okay with you going. And I am amazed that you have to ask, what's the matter with me going away with my sisters?" Kate was clearly annoyed. I was stunned. I shook my head and responded, "As you well know, Mickey and Jan are 304s. They were 304s 5 years ago when we started dating. As you pointed out, they're 304s today after each was divorced for cheating. Your sisters are each homing devices for heat-seeking dicks, and you know it. That's what the matter is with you going without me. So you don't trust me? That's not the question we're discussing. You asked if I was okay with you going away to dance, drink, and lay around in bikinis on a week-long cruise with your 304 sisters. I'm not okay with that and never will be." Kate took a few moments to calm herself before she said, "You can't tell me I can't go. Once again, sweetheart, that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing my feelings about you leaving your family to go on vacation with your 304 sisters." "I wish you would stop calling them 304s, Kate said. I shrugged and replied, "I wish they weren't 304s. Before we could continue, our waiter approached the table and asked if we were enjoying our dessert. When we agreed that it was delicious, the waiter said, "Our last course is a glass of our award-winning plum wine. May I bring it to you?" Before Kate could agree, I said, "No thanks." I fished my credit card out of my wallet, handed it to the waiter and said, "Please run the card at 20% for the tip, and bring me the receipt to sign." Kate was indignant. She raised her voice and said, "We will be staying for the wine." To the waiter she added, "And we'll take it now." "Thank you." I suspected that the waiter knew that despite giving my wife a beautiful pendant, I wasn't getting laid at the end of our date. I smiled at the waiter and said, "Bring my wife her wine and bring her my glass too. When you've run my card, give it back to my wife and call her a cap." The waiter's eyes almost popped out of her head as I tossed my napkin on the table, stood and headed to the coat room for my jacket. After starting the car, I looked at the clock and gave Kate exactly 3 minutes to pay the tab and make her way to the parking lot. She made it with 7 seconds to spare and was fuming as she climbed into the car. "Don't you ever embarrass me like that again. Do you understand me?" I drove for half a mile before I calmly responded, "We just finished a discussion where I was informed that I can't tell you not to go away for a week with your 304 sisters. If that's the case, you can't tell me not to embarrass you in public, and I'll do it any time I want. Kate was flabbergasted. I'd never talked to her like that before. She wisely decided to remain quiet for the remainder of our drive. I parked our car in the barn while Kate made her way to the door that led into the house. I climbed the stairs to my office. Where are you going? We're not finished talking. Come to the house now. I was halfway up the stairs when I turned and yelled, "Who the hell do you think you're talking to? Don't ever again tell me what to do." Kate stood with her jaw unhinged as I slammed my office door behind me. The temperature in our home varied over the next few weeks, from frosty to Arctic cold, depending on the day. I slept in my office many nights. It was 4 days before Kate was scheduled to leave when she cornered me in my office. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Sure," I said, pointing to a chair. "Please have a seat." Kate stared at me for quite a while before she said, "I don't want to leave you mad at me." I shrugged and said, "There's an easy way to change my mood. Chris, I'm going on the cruise." "That's final." We sat quietly for a few moments before I asked, "Can I say a few things?" After Kate nodded in agreement, I told her, "This is the first time in our entire life together that I've been concerned about the health of our marriage. It's the first time I've been concerned that your actions could lead to our family splitting up. That's not fair, Chris. Do you really think I'm going to screw some guy on the cruise? Sitting here now, I know that you aren't considering cheating on me, but in a few days you'll be with your sisters, drinking and partying. 3 gorgeous women in that type of environment will attract men, and that could easily lead to unintended consequences, especially when 2 of the women are 304s. And Kate, you know I'm right." I could tell that Kate was formulating a response and was caught off guard when I insisted that she knew I was correct. She had the decency to blush. I continued, "You need to understand that I'm concerned about a lot of things, not just sex. Are you going to kiss any men? Are you going to hold hands? How about slow dancing with his hands on your hips, or allowing a man to spread sunscreen over your body while you lay by the pool? Chris, you're being ridiculous. I'm not planning on doing any of those things. But even if they happen, those things aren't that bad." I think my smile unnerved Kate. I asked, "Why aren't you planning on doing any of those things?" "Because a married woman shouldn't be involved with a man in that way. But if a drunken mistake happens, it doesn't in any way mean that it should lead to divorce." I shook my head and said, "We keep going around in the same stupid circle. You have not considered my very strong feelings and concerns about this trip. If I find out that you have acted in an inappropriate manner, I will not consider your feelings. I'll do what's best for me and my daughters, up to and including divorce." I can't believe that you're talking about divorce. I can't believe that your decision to go on this vacation has led us to talking about divorce. Listen, I continued, I've accepted that you'll be taking this trip. I obviously don't like it, but I accept it. I hope you and your sisters have an enjoyable time. But I want you to understand my concerns and know without fail that if you cross the line and do something inappropriate and I find out, I'll throw you to the curb in a second. I was surprised when tears streamed down Kate's cheeks. She jumped from her seat, walked to my office door, and over her shoulder shouted, "I'm not planning on doing anything wrong." On the morning of Kate's departure, we were sitting around the kitchen table. The leftover scraps of a waffle breakfast were the only evidence left from our delicious meal. Kate was asking the girls about their plans for the week, when the kitchen clock hit 8 o'clock in the morning. Kate looked at me and said, "We need to get going." I told Kate that we'd pick up Mickey at 8:30 and Jan at 9 o'clock. "Of course you're driving us to the airport, Kate. I've got conference calls scheduled for 8:30, 9 o'clock and 9:45. I'm going to my office." "What the hell's wrong with you? What kind of husband doesn't drive his wife to the airport?" I was halfway to the kitchen door when I answered, "The kind of husband who won't support this vacation in any way." Then, turning to the girls, I told them, "Please clean off the table and counters before you turn on the TV." The next 9 years flew by. Kate had just turned 13, Kara was 11 and Carla was 8. I continued to love the responsibility of being Mr. Mom and being the primary caregiver to the children. Kate appreciated my efforts as it allowed her to continue as a top administrator in our town school system, as well as hold posts on several state of Connecticut and national education boards. I was incredibly proud of my wife, while also enjoying the close bond one had formed with my 3 daughters. It was a Friday afternoon during the last full week in April. Kate had returned 2 weeks earlier from her 9th spring vacation cruise with her sisters. My phone was muted, and I was listening in on a conference call I wasn't scheduled to contribute to, only listen. I was standing by the open office window, enjoying the warm spring breeze, when Kate's car sped into the driveway, closely followed by her sister Jan's car. Kate jumped out of her car, and Jan and Mickey climbed out of the other car. I heard Jan ask what was so important. Kate shushed her sister and said, "Let's talk in the kitchen. I don't want to take the chance that Chris will hear us." This sounds like it's more important than my conference call, I thought as I disconnected my phone. Almost immediately, I punched the home security app on my cell phone and navigated to the camera in her kitchen. I watched as the women came through the back door. As Mickey and Jan took seats around our table, Kate poured 2 glasses of wine for her sisters. "Are you having any?" Mickey asked after a pause. "I can't," Kate answered. "I'm on antibiotics." "What's wrong with you?" Jan wanted to know. "I can't believe it, but one of the a-holes I slept with gave me gonorrhea," Kate admitted. "Oh," Jan said. "You've given it to Chris?" "No," Kate yelled. "He's always pissed when I get back from the cruise. We get back into sex after a couple of weeks. When will your doctor be notifying Chris?" Mickey wanted to know. "I don't think they will. I went to a walk-in clinic in Albany, New York and paid cash. I told them that I was single, and the only sex I'd had in the last 6 months was on the cruise with strangers. I had to give the clinic our cruise line information, and the first names of the guys I slept with. The medical authorities will try to track down the guy who passed this to me." I didn't need to hear any more and shut off the app. I went to the bookshelf, opened the bottle of Knob Creek and poured an inch. After sitting behind my desk and taking a healthy sip, I realized that I'd been preparing for this moment for a decade, and had already thought through the tasks necessary to end my marriage to Kate. I was sad, almost dead inside, but I was determined to look out for myself and my children. I called my personal attorney and told him to start a divorce petition. I wanted the prenuptial agreement enforced. I wanted the house as I'd inherited it from my grandfather. Most importantly, as the primary caregiver, I insisted on full custody of my girls. My attorney agreed that the custody issue shouldn't be a problem. I instructed my attorney to file the divorce papers using irreconcilable differences, but to have a second set of divorce papers prepared that listed infidelity. I wasn't worried about splitting our banking accounts. Early on, my attorney advised Kate and me to keep separate accounts in case my business failed. We each contributed equally to the household budget on a quarterly basis, but kept the remainder of our finances under our own names. I canceled 2 joint credit cards and paid off the balance using our household budget account. 30 minutes after hearing the fateful conversation, I grabbed the rest of my drink and headed to the kitchen. The girls' conversation died down as I came through the door. Kate looked at me and asked, "Bad day, honey?" I sat at my spot at the far end of the kitchen table, nodded and said, "Yeah, real bad." The group looked on with interest as Kate asked, "Do you want to tell us about it?" As I was thinking about my response, we heard Kate coming through the front door. Her best friend's mom had given her a ride home from middle school.
Now start second story.
Yesterday, before I dropped by Dad's store, I was a loving husband with a wife I would die for and 2 friends that I greatly enjoyed. I had a very successful construction business and a great future. I was looking forward to the time my wife and I would have a child. Today, I am a bitter soul bent on destroying my wife and friends. Oh, I don't plan to do anything that would get me put in jail, but who knows? I might slip up and go berserk. I suppose you might want to know why I changed overnight. Well, I didn't really change overnight. Rather, I began worrying several months ago and changed in the blink of an eye. Listen to my tale of woe, and follow along as I careen down the pathway of revenge. Let's start with the story. I lived and went to college in the same town I grew up in. All my friends, minus the few that moved away or had died for some reason, lived nearby. My father owned and operated the local building supply center and hardware store. He had wanted me to get my degree and come back to help him, eventually to take over the store. When I was young, he had forced me to work in the store. I spent many evenings and weekends there before I got out of high school and during college. I enjoyed talking to the contractors who purchased their materials from Dad. When I made deliveries, I watched how they built things and asked questions. I can't say I hated the job in Dad's store, but I didn't like it. The best part of the work was going on deliveries to help unload and later making the deliveries by myself. I really did not want to take over the store. When I was not working in the store, I did like many boys in town and mowed yards for pocket money. One day, I was working for a widow and watching her try to repair a storage building in her yard. She was having a lot of trouble, partly because she did not have the proper tools for the job, partly because she was not strong enough to do the heavy work, and partly because she just plain did not know how to proceed. Finally, when I finished the yard, I offered to help her. At first, she was hesitant because I was just a 15-year-old boy. To this day, I do not know where I got the courage to push her to hire me, but I did. I told her it was obvious she was not able to do the work, and I thought I was. I pointed out some of the things she was doing wrong and explained that she just wasn't strong enough or tall enough to do the job. I told her I would do it for $50 if she bought the materials. I also told her if she did not like the work after I was finished, she did not have to pay me. Finally, she agreed to let me do the work. I did the job to her satisfaction and she paid me. She actually did something more valuable for me than giving me the money, though. She began telling her older single friends about my work and how good a job I did for her, both on the repair and in mowing her yard. I began getting calls from other women wanting me to repair things for them. I was always careful to do the work correctly. If I did not know how to do something, I would ask one of my contractor friends. I always charged less than a real licensed contractor would charge. After I had worked for several older women, I began to get calls from men and families. By the time I was in college, I had a small handyman business and had many of the necessary licenses to do the work. I also still had my lawn care business. I had to hire my friends to help from time to keep up, especially in the summer. I was making enough money in the evenings, weekends, and summer to pay for my college, a newer truck, and my dates. I was also able to enjoy my youth, although I have to admit I did work long hours and my dates always started later than most boys' dates did. After I graduated high school, I got tired of living with my parents and rented an apartment. I lived in the apartment during my first year of college. I did not enjoy apartment living, so I began looking for a house to rent after the year's lease ran out. One of my friends from high school had just divorced one of my best buddies, Joe. She had caught him cheating with one of our classmates and filed for divorce. Brenda worked as a real estate agent and struggled to make ends meet. We were talking one evening, commiserating about her failed marriage at our favorite hangout. We both lived in apartments and neither one of us liked it. I told her I was thinking about renting a house. I asked her if she had any reasonably priced rental property she could show me. She asked how much I could pay. When I told her, she looked shocked and said, "Hell, Stan, with a third-year loan you could buy a pretty nice house for that much a month. Why don't you buy a house instead of renting? That way you could build equity instead of pouring your money down a deep empty rat hole as rent." I told her I had never considered that and mentioned that I didn't have much for a down payment. "Well, let me do some checking and I'll get back to you," she said. When I left the hangout, I managed to get an older friend to buy me some beer. By the time the evening was over, I had forgotten about our conversation, but she sure didn't. I guess the thought of a nice commission does that to you, though. The next Monday evening, Glenda called me and asked to meet her at the bar again. In our town, we had several bars that served burgers and sodas in a small room where underage people could eat. When I walked in, she had some papers in front of her and she seemed excited. Almost before I got seated, she began talking. "Stan, I found several places that I think you can afford, but most of them aren't in very good locations. I did find one place for sale that I think you might like. Do you remember the old Harris place on the edge of town?" I nodded yes, and she continued. "Well, you know, when they got older, they built a nice new 3-car garage and put a mother-in-law apartment over it. I think they were planning to use it for a living caregiver if the need arose. The new garage was several feet from the house. 2 years ago, you remember the house caught fire?" I shook my head yes again, and she said, "Well, they decided not to rebuild and moved into a retirement community here in town. The garage was not damaged too badly during the fire. I was talking to Ida the other day, and she said they were tired of paying the taxes on the place and doing what little upkeep they did. She said they wanted to sell the place and I listed it. It is 20 acres, and they are asking $110,000 for it. You would have to do a little work on the garage and apartment, but it would be great for you. The best thing is all the utilities are already in. There are several newer houses going up in the area, so I really expect the contractor to try and buy it soon and subdivide it. It isn't in the multi-list book yet, so it hasn't shown but a time or two. They would only need about $20,000 down. Stan, a 20-year payment would be about half the rent you now pay monthly. So if you could make the down payment, I really think this would be a good deal for you. I thought about it for a while. I didn't have that much money, but from what I remember of the place, I really wanted it badly. I told her I wanted to look at it the next evening. Later that evening, I asked Dad if he would loan me the down payment. I have to admit he was not really anxious to do so, but I reminded him the monthly payments on the land would be half the rent I now paid, so I could pay him some back each month after I got the apartment repaired and livable. We finally agreed he would loan me the down payment if I wanted to buy the place after I saw it. The next evening I went to the place and fell in love with it all over again. Even with the burned-out shell of the house there, it was even prettier than I remembered. The fire didn't even kill all the trees and shrubs in the yard. I could look down the hill to a small stream meandering through the property. I told Glenda to write up an offer of $90,000. Tuesday evening after classes, I got a call from Glenda. She sounded excited and said, "Stan, I can't believe it." When I presented the offer to Ida and Homer, they were going to reject it out of hand. I was getting ready to leave when she turned to Homer and asked him if he thought you were the nice young man that had cut their yard all those years. They asked me if you had a mowing service in school, and when I told them you did, they smiled and began telling me what a nice young man you were. Anyway, they won't take $90,000 for the place, but they did counter with $97,500. Isn't that great? I didn't think for very long. I said, yeah, that's fine. Tell them I will pay that and I want possession at closing. The bank required my father to co-sign the loan, but it went through and I got possession of the property in late April. I made the necessary repairs and moved into the apartment on the 1st of June. The next few months I kept busy with my summer business of yard work and small building projects. By now I had 10 employees, most of them seasonal. I had a little time to date Patty and began to clean up my property. After I got the trash from the burned house cleared away, I had an engineer friend look at the foundation. He decided the foundation was sound since the subflooring had not burned through. The fire had been in the attic and second floor primarily, so I could use it to rebuild. This would save several thousand because I did not have to do as much dirt work and didn't need to pour a new cement foundation. The house had been a smaller, older structure of about 1,000 square feet on the first floor. I rented a backhoe and extended the foundation toward the garage, doing almost all the work myself. I began to use my spare time and spare cash to build myself a nice home. I connected the house to the garage with an enclosed cement floor, glass, and breezeway. I made arrangements to put a large hot tub on the cement pad in the breezeway. I installed a wood stove in this area for heat and ducted into the rest of the house as I built it. The summer I graduated from college, I finished the house. It was 2,450 square feet, and I built it for comfort and convenience. I had stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, oak trim, and a brick exterior. In short, it wasn't a McMansion, but it was a very upscale home. I had a beautiful covered patio facing south, overlooking the small stream. I had finished it for about half the cost it would have sold for. Patty loved it when we got married. I almost got the impression Patty was marrying me for my house instead of myself. By the time I got out of college, I had graduated to building new structures. I built additions, repaired older homes and buildings and garages too, but now a lot of my income came from new structures. I now have 20 employees. Patty began working for my father in his business when we became engaged. After she got her degree, she became a full-time employee and assistant manager. He was grooming her for a manager when he retired. I was an only child, so the business would pass to us upon his death. I bought all my materials from Dad, so we compounded the family profits from my construction business. My wife Patty and I were childhood sweethearts, and I thought, like most married men, that we would be together forever. Oh sure, we had the normal squabbles like any married couple, but they were minor. When we were dating in high school and later in college, we had broken up like most young couples do. We both dated others and were intimate with others during that time, but we always came back together because we could not find anyone we loved more. I did have one girl that might have been the one, but one of my friends had her tied up before we made that decision. Finally, in our last year of college, Patty and I became a solidly exclusive couple. That Christmas I asked her to marry me and she said yes. Patty set the wedding date in September after we graduated. The wedding almost didn't happen because of Patty's insistence on a prenuptial agreement. Now I wish we hadn't married. Oh well, on with the sad story. Apparently, Patty had inherited several $100,000 from her grandfather, and she, or maybe her father, did not want me to get my hands on it. I told her I had no desire to spend her money, and resented the fact she thought I would marry her for it. In any event, we were not speaking very kindly to each other the night she told me about the prenuptial agreement. I suppose now that I was lucky that my parents were out for a drive and decided to stop off and see me. When Patty heard them knocking on the door, she was so angry she flounced out as I let them in. Before she went past them on the landing, I heard her say, "You need to talk some sense into your son, or this wedding may never occur." Dad and Mom watched as she stormed to her car and drove off. I was still standing with the prenup in my hands when they turned to me and asked what our argument was about. I told them and Mom said, "Oh Stan, we thought it might be something important. Honey, we know you aren't marrying her for her money, so what's the big problem? Sign the darn thing and marry the girl if you love her." Dad was sitting with a frown on his face and asked if he could see the agreement. He looked it over closely and said, "This seems pretty straightforward, except she did not have the attorney exempt your place here or your potential inheritance from us from the community property. It seems fair that if she exempts her funds and anything she may inherit from her side of the family, that the same should be exempt for you. Son, why don't we take this to the business attorney and have him make suggestions?" I reached for the agreement and read it through. Dad was right, it only addressed her money and her inheritances. I began to get angry again. I agreed with him and he said he would make an appointment for me. I had used his attorney for my few legal needs, so I guess it was really my attorney also. I got an appointment for the following Tuesday, and the attorney agreed with Dad. He scanned the agreement into his computer and made the changes we discussed. When he finished revising the agreement, it exempted my land and business and anything I might inherit, just as it exempted the same for Patty. I went to her home the evening my attorney finished the changes to the agreement. I had already signed it. When Patty and her father read the new agreement, they both became angry. He looked at me and said, "Just what is the idea of changing the agreement we prepared, young man? I thought you loved my daughter and now you are accusing her of wanting to take your house and business. You know when you marry that will become her home also. If, heaven forbid, you divorce, don't you think she would deserve a place to live?" I became angry with him and replied, "Yes sir, she would deserve a place to live, but it seemed fair to my father and to me that if the possessions she had before we married and her potential inheritance were to be protected in case of divorce, the same should apply to me. You will note that any accumulation we have from earnings or investments during the marriage would be divided equally, unless the marriage ends due to infidelity. In that case, each of us would leave with what we brought into the marriage or inherited, and the non-injured party would leave with 75% of the marital assets accumulated after the marriage. I feel that there should be some penalty built into the agreement as compensation or punishment for any infidelity." Patty and her father were way beyond upset. They were furious about the proposed agreement. Needless to say, for the next few days things were very tense between Patty and me. I asked several times why she was so upset about the agreement since she was the one who wanted a prenuptial agreement. Most of the time, Patty said it was because I wanted to turn her out into the street if we divorced, and she loved the house as much as I did. She didn't think it was fair for me to keep her home if we divorced. I was almost ready to ask for my ring back when she began to thaw. She signed the changed agreement, but it took us several weeks to get back to where we were before she asked for a prenuptial agreement. We finally forgot our anger and forgive each other for the hurt feelings raised by the prenuptial agreement. We married as planned, and for the next 2.5 years, we did not look back and were never sorry. We never looked at another person as a lover, or at least I didn't. Now I know Patty did. I caught her yesterday. The only problem I had with Patty working in the lumberyard was all the flirting she had to put up with. I admit I was a little jealous, but I knew many of the men that purchased items from Dad. They were sex hounds, and Patty was a beautiful, fun-loving woman. One of my friends, Joe, was already divorced because he couldn't keep his pecker in his pants. Many times I would go into the store and find him flirting with Patty. I won't say we argued over him or the flirting she did with other men, but we did have some spirited discussions. Patty maintained that she needed to flirt a little to keep the customers happy. I told her I thought she just needed to treat them nicely, be friendly and be their friend, not a flirt. Of course, she took exception to me calling her actions flirting, and said that was just what she was doing. My college degree was in construction management, and Patty got one in business administration, so our degrees supported our vocations very well. Shortly after I got out of college, I decided we had enough money to build a home on speculation. Dad let me be an exception to his rule requiring all accounts to be paid at the end of the month. He said since I was family I could draw up to $100,000 on account and pay when a house sold. He did keep a lien against the properties, however, in case something happened to me. All other customers were supposed to pay in full monthly. I was good at my work and knew it. I was a general contractor, but I used very few subcontractors. I had my own framing, drywall finishing, plumbing and wiring crews. I did hire out the heating and air conditioning work. I even used my still operating yard care crews to landscape and put in yards on my projects, assuming, of course, that the clients would hire us to do so. In any event, I used a speculation house to keep my crews busy during off periods. I did not want to lay my men off if I didn't have to, so I tried to keep them busy. We finished the spec house and it sold before we had the yard in. I started another and it sold before it was finished, and we completed it to the new owner's desires. Now I had enough money saved to do 2 spec homes at once. All at once the business was booming and I almost didn't have time to do the smaller jobs that had once been my bread and butter. Between Patty's salary and my profits, we were in tall clover. We were rapidly becoming one of the highest income families in our small town of about 25,000 souls. All our success came at a price, though. I would work 8 to 10-hour days with the crews and do paperwork before and after the day's construction. In the evenings, I would meet with customers and potential customers to make bids and discuss progress on their projects. Patty took to working late in the office to do her books. We seemed to have less and less time together. Many times I would go by the building center and see her car and 2 or 3 others there. Sometimes I would go in and there would be Joe or one of our other classmates sitting and talking to her. They all worked in the building trade, so they were supposedly getting prices from her, but something just didn't feel right. Sometimes Patty would be flushed when I went into the office, and many times they would be drinking beer. Of course I would have one with them and we would visit, but things felt wrong to me. Finally, I decided to disable the local buzzer on the building alarm. Normally, when someone entered the building through any of the doors, a buzzer went off. I disabled the one on the entrance from the warehouse. Yesterday, before I dropped by Dad's store, I was a loving husband with a wife I would die for and 2 friends that I enjoyed greatly. I had a very successful construction business and a great future. I was looking forward to the time my wife and I would have a child. Today, I am a bitter asshole bent on destroying my wife and friends. Oh, I don't plan to do anything to get myself put in jail, but who knows, I might slip up and go berserk. I suppose you might want to know why I changed overnight. Well, I didn't really change overnight. Rather, I began worrying several months ago and changed in the blink of an eye. Listen to my tale of woe and follow along as I careen down the pathway of revenge. Last night when I went past the store, Joe's and George's trucks were both in the lot. I turned into the lot and went to the door with the disabled buzzer. I knew before I even got to Patty's office what I would find. I could hear her moaning and screaming from halfway across the building. I took out my cell phone and set it to take pictures. The damn witch didn't even have her office door closed. She was over her desk and Joe had his pants down. He was standing behind her and having sex with her. Finally he pulled back from Patty. She continued to lie over her desk. George walked up beside Patty and helped her stand. He pulled her to him, gave her a deep French kiss and then said, "Here, honey, let's get you naked. I want to play with you." I watched and took pictures while George helped Patty strip. I was going to get a picture of him having sex with her and then go in and wreak some bodily harm on my 2 ex-friends. I backed away from the door so they wouldn't see me until I was ready. I remembered Dad usually had a tape recorder in his office and went to see if it was there. I wanted to tape some of the conversation if I could. I found the tape recorder and brought it back. I set it on the floor beside the door as I watched my wife serve as my two ex-friends. They continued for a few more minutes. I was further infuriated by the conversation I taped. As she stood up, I heard Joe say, "Damn, Patty, aren't you glad you let me drill you again at the Christmas party 2 years ago? I told you it would be the best damn sex you ever had in your life, didn't I? I was talking to Jared the other day and told him about the hot honey I was doing now, and he wants to meet you. Are you sure you won't let him come in some evening also?" Patty pushed him away and turned her head to him. "No, I don't mind doing you too. Hell, I love doing you too, but I don't want or need anyone else. I didn't like him when we were in school and I still don't. The one time he screwed me before Stan and I got married, he was an asshole. He hurt me and didn't even make sure I enjoyed myself. I always enjoyed our time together before we got married and I still enjoy it. If you can keep your damn mouth shut, we can keep this up forever, but you have to be careful. Stan is getting really pissed at the way you two are acting when he can see us. If you don't cool it, I'll have to cut you off." I decided I had enough on tape and enough pictures. I had picked up a baseball bat when I was in Dad's office. I was going to put the hurt on Joe and George. I picked it up and started into the room when I had a thought. George had always been really jealous. He was still married to his high school sweetheart. She and I had dated several times. In fact, they did not become serious until after Patty and I became engaged. I had enjoyed sex with her, so I thought I might just see if I could seduce her before I did a number on him. In fact, that would probably be a better payback than just knocking him around. He always cried in high school when she and he were on the outs, and he hated it the few times I had dated her. I quietly backed out of the room and left the building. I set the alarm and reattached the buzzer wires on the door as I left. I couldn't wait for the excitement when Patty and her two friends set off the burglar alarm when they walked across the showroom floor to leave. The alarm keypads were beside the doors and there were motion sensors in the main part of the building, so before they could discover the alarms were set, the alarms would go off. I knew she would be able to disable the alarm, but the damage would be done. She would wonder how it got set, and she would have to wait in the building for the police to come. I wondered how she would explain the alarm, and if Joe and George would have enough sense to leave before the police got there. Patty was very late getting home. She came into the house and walked up to me very nervously. I watched her face and she seemed scared. I smiled to myself and asked her, "What's the matter, honey? You seem nervous and you're a lot later than you usually are." Patty licked her lips and sat on the edge of her chair facing me. She said I was working late. We couldn't get the books to balance and I didn't think I would ever find the problem. "What were you doing tonight? I thought you might come by or at least call since I was so late. I know I'm getting used to you being late, but I didn't feel like coming by and drinking beer with you and your boyfriends." Patty's face turned white, then she blushed. "Damn you, Stan. I keep telling you nothing's going on. Joe and George weren't even there. Why can't you get it through your damn head that I have to visit with them to keep them happy?" "Okay, honey," I said. "I know you have to schmooze the customers. I just drove by around 6.30 and thought I saw their trucks there." "Well, they were there then," she said. "They came just about closing time. And I had to wait for them to pay for and load their order before I got to the books. They were gone shortly after closing. I just meant they weren't there the whole time I was. I'm tired. I'm going to take a nice hot bath and go to bed." I smiled and said, "Great, I'll be there in a jiffy. I've been horny all day." Patty looked worried again and said, "No, I'm sorry, honey. I'm really bushed. I don't feel like it tonight. Why don't we have a quickie in the morning before we go to work?" I just smiled to myself. I thought it would be a cold day in hell before I went for sloppy seconds. I wondered how many times I had gotten them without knowing it. I made a mental note that I needed to get tested for diseases too. I had just said that to jerk Patty's chain. The next morning I left early before Patty woke up. As soon as my attorney's office opened, I called for an appointment. He managed to fit me in at noon if I would take him out for lunch. I agreed and we grabbed a quick meal at a sandwich shop near his office. He wanted to talk about the problem there, but I asked him if we could just eat in a hurry and go back to his office. He said, of course, but what could be so secret we can't talk about here? I do a lot of business over lunch. I just told him it was sensitive to my business and I didn't want things to get out until I had all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. When we got to his office, I began explaining what the problem was. I told him I wanted a divorce immediately based on Patty's adultery, and wanted the prenuptial enforced to the letter. I showed him the pictures and let him listen to the tape. I also told him I would appreciate it if he only showed the pictures of Joe and Patty, and didn't use the tape unless he had to. Why do you want to keep George out of it? He asked. Well, I'm not sure you will approve, but after the divorce I have some plans for George. I don't want to tip him off, I replied. Lawrence, the attorney, broke in on my conversation with him. I hope you aren't planning anything violent. I have to report something like that as an officer of the court. I laughed and said, no, I'm not planning violence. I used to date George's wife, Susan. She and he dated and broke up several times, and twice I dated her during the breakup. They almost always go to Murphy's Tavern on weekends. I think I'm going to make some moves on Susan to piss George off. I want to give her the info I have on him cheating, but I want to play with his mind first. She will get a heads up on this and I will get a little payback on good old George. He used to get so angry every time she dated someone else, and I hear he gets jealous when she spends too much time dancing with other people. I just want to see if I can seduce her after my divorce is final and let him find out about it. I guess you could say I want to give him a dose of his own medicine. I also intend to try and seduce Joe's fiancée. There will be no violence unless one of those assholes starts it. Stan, I don't like this. It could blow up in your face, but you are right. There is nothing illegal about seducing a woman, but you should know they could sue you for alienation of affection. I laughed and said, let them. Bring it on. I will countersue, and I have pictures and a tape to use in that suit. Don't you think it would be almost a wash? Lawrence leaned back in his chair and thought for a moment. Finally he said, yes, the suits could possibly balance out if one is filed, but you need to remember you might have larger assets than they do. Even if you both won the lawsuits in court, you might come out worse off financially if there is a judgment against you. Besides, don't you think that is a disgusting thing to do to those ladies? I suppose they will be hurting enough just finding out about their men cheating on them. If you use them like that, it will surely hurt them worse. I have to admit my heart was made of stone. No, I said, I don't care. They took the chance when they chose those cheating assholes. Wednesday, I received a phone call from Lawrence. He told me the divorce was ready to file, and he planned to serve Patty that afternoon. Great, I said. I'll get busy and change the locks on the doors this morning. I will pack as many of her clothes as I can and put them on the front porch. I am going to place pictures of her and Joe on every door so she can see them when she comes over. Oh boy, I don't know who was the angriest when they hit the fan at Dad's store. I got a phone call from 3 very angry people within minutes of Patty being served. She called and had a screaming fit and told me I would be sorry I was ever born. Dad called just after she stormed out of the store. Her father called and cursed me out just after I hung up from talking to Dad. While I was talking to Dad, I said, Dad, I really need to thank you for talking me into that prenuptial agreement. I filed for the divorce because I walked into the office Saturday night and found Patty having sex on her desk with Joe and George. I have pictures and a tape. Thanks to you, I will get to keep my home and business as well as 3/4 of our assets. I do think you should change your store locks and the computer passwords in case she decides to do something we wouldn't appreciate. I suggest you fire her, but that is your decision. You need to decide if you can trust her after this. Damn, son, I just can't believe that happened right here in the store. Yeah, I'll have the girls get right on the changes to the computer and so forth. We'll be over this evening to talk some more. When Dad and Mom came to my home that evening, they were devastated, especially Mother, who had loved Patty. She was the daughter they never had. I convinced them that it would be best if they let Patty go. I said, and I really believed, that Patty might do something to damage the business if she remained in her position. The next morning, when Patty found out she not only lost her husband but also her job, she became really angry.
Now start second story.
Hard work to keep a marriage alive. Barbara, Jeb Phillips' daughter-in-law, gave each family member one of these kits to trace their ancestors. In her own family, everyone spit into the test tube and was thrilled with the results. It turned out they were 100% Swedish Norwegian, not a drop of other blood. Barbara knew that her husband's family had been mongrelized and thought it would be interesting to see how much they mixed. That would be fun, she had no idea. Mix could have so many different meanings. You never know how it's going to end up. But Barbara is one of those women who can light up a room just by walking into it. So the entire Phillips family had done the spit in a test tube test, and were going to release the results right after Easter dinner. Philip's mom, Haley, did everything right. The dinner table was bursting with a variety of vegetables and other side dishes to a sumptuous lamb roast with Spanish-style rice, a family favorite. Jeb's siblings, older brother Hal and younger sister Marty, were there with their spouses. Jeb invited his current girlfriend, but she declined so she could spend the day at her grandparents' house. Their relationship was in its infancy, so they were lucky they didn't have to eat twice on Easter. Jeb's father, Harold, did the honors by slicing up the lamb and giving a piece to everyone at the family table. Even Marty took a piece, apparently after her 2-year experiment with vegetarianism. As their plates filled, Hal said Grace and Harold made a toast to the love and kindness this family had shown each other. If anyone noticed the tears rolling from Haley's eyes, no one mentioned it. Haley had a habit of crying when she was happy, when she was watching old movies, or on those rare occasions when she was sad. The family was used to Haley's tears. When everyone finished eating, Hal and Jeb cleared the table. It was customary in the Phillips house. Mom cooked with Marty's help, and the boys cleared the table and filled the dishwasher. Jeb and Hal returned to the table, and found everyone sitting with unopened envelopes in front of their seats. The plan was to read the results and then tackle banana cream pie for dessert. While the envelopes were being opened, Haley got up from the table and apologized. Everyone assumed she had gone to the bathroom and continued reading the test results. Harold read his first, 95% British-Irish, 5% Dutch. As soon as Hal opened the envelope, Barbara snatched it from his hands, too excited to wait. I knew it, I knew you had an interesting mix, 46% British-Irish, 28% French-German, and 26% Iberian. That's Spanish and Portuguese, right? Barbara handed the printout back to her husband and leaned to the left to look at Marty's printout. It's almost the same, only Marty has more French-German and less Iberian. What do you say, Jeb? Jeb stared at the printout. The expression on his face testified to the confusion raging in his head. He took his eyes off the page to focus on Barbara's smiling face, then on his brother and sister sitting on either side of Barbara. Finally he turned to the head of the table. His father stared back at him. He couldn't read the expression in his father's eyes. The silence was interrupted by Hal. Did I just hear the garage door open? Where's Mom? Hal got up from the table and looked out the front window. Dad, Mom are pulling out of the driveway. What the hell is going on? Marty pulled out her cell phone and dialed her mother's number. Now everyone was looking at Marty as she waited for Haley to answer the phone. The room was quiet, quiet enough to hear Haley's voice when she picked up the phone. I'm sorry, baby. Tell everyone I'm sorry. And then the line went dead. Dad, what's going on? Harold looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. Jeb, why don't you read what the service sent you? Jeb hesitated. Did his father really want this to go public? Go on, son. It says here that I'm 50% Italian, 22% Iberian, and 28% French-German. Suddenly, Jeb remembered all the ridicule he and Ted Rizzo had gotten in school because they were alike. He looked at his father. Dad, did you know? The rest of the family sat in stunned silence, watching and waiting for Harold's answer. I began to suspect it when I saw you and Ted Rizzo standing next to each other on your high school baseball team. It was around the same time that Ted's mother and father split up. No one knew why they broke up, but it didn't take a genius to assume that Ted's mother saw the same thing I did. Harold turned to the others. I don't mean to be rude, but I think Jeb and I need to discuss this privately, outside on the porch. Hal, Marty, I think you should give your mother some time before you call her, and when you do, please be kind. This is not the time to pry answers out of her. I have my own questions that I think should be answered first. Please respect your mother's privacy and my privacy. Jeb, grab your drink and let's go outside. Jeb and Harold went out on the porch and sat down. Jeb didn't wait to ask his first question. So, is Mr. Rizzo my father? Well, I'm your father. Please don't insult the 22 years I spent raising you by denying me that title. I'm sorry, Dad. That didn't sound right. So did you? I meant to say that just because I didn't contribute to your DNA doesn't mean you're not my son, or that I don't love you as much as I always have. But to answer your question, maybe Rizzo is your biological father, I don't know. We'll have to ask your mom when she's ready. Where do you think she went? Harold actually laughed. Where else would she go? I suspect that right now she's sitting on your Aunt April's couch, crying her eyes out in her sister's arms. Dad, you said you started suspecting over 12 years ago. Why didn't you ever confront Mom and ask her about it? A bunch of reasons. First of all, I didn't want anything to come between us. By the time I began to suspect it, I was hopelessly in love with you as my son. I was always proud of you and of being your father. I didn't want anything to change. Harold sipped from his whiskey glass and continued. I hope you didn't start thinking the worst of me as a man. But the second reason is that I love your mother so damn much that I didn't want that to change either. As far as I could tell, your mother was in love with me. She showed me that love every day we were married. When I reflect on it, her love only intensified after you were born. If she did have an affair with Ted's father, she spent the last 20+ years trying to make it up to me. I was happy to let her do that. But if you like the status quo, why did you go along with Barbara's suggestion of DNA testing? Hell, Jeb, you know your brother's wife. Do you think she'll ever let it go? That girl is so damn innocent. It never occurred to her that our family might have a skeleton in the closet. Your brother is a lucky man. Father and son laughed as Harold filled Jeb's glass 2 fingers full again. Besides, it's time to follow through. Your mother and I had a secret all these years and I wanted to know who, what, and why. I probably could have done that in a more appropriate setting. But I guess I fell into the dumbass category. That, and I thought your mom would turn to me with some answers before things got this far. I really didn't expect her to snap like that. Now the two of them sat and let the silence of Haley's backyard fill their senses without saying a word. Haley's spring flowers, white lilies, blue irises and colorful pansies adorned the brick-lined patio. It was truly a peaceful, beautiful place. 10 minutes passed in silence before Hal poked his head out the back door. Dad, Jeb, we're all gonna leave if you don't want us here. Marty tried to call her mom again, but it went to voicemail. You know Marty and Barbara. Neither of those two could part with it that easily. Marty was standing right behind Hal's back when he said this and expressed her displeasure by punching her older brother in the arm. Marty hugged her father and then her brother Jeb, practically robbing him of his breath. There were tears in her eyes. Marty's husband shook everyone's hands and led Marty away. Barbara was next, repeating the sequence of actions. She hugged Harold and pulled Jeb to her, kissing his cheek before Hal let her out the side gate. Harold escorted them out with a look and pointed Jeb to a patio chair. Let's finish our drinks. I'd like you to do me a favor. Could you ask Ted if he knows how to contact his father? Jeb looked at his father. Why? You're not going to do something stupid, are you? No, it's not like it hasn't crossed my mind once or twice. Sometimes I fantasize about hurting him, but right now I just need to talk to him before I talk to your mother. That's the problem with infidelity, Jeb. It takes away your trust in your spouse's words and actions. Remember that if and when you get married, you'll have plenty of opportunities to stray. And you may think you can handle it without hurting your marriage, but it always takes at least a little time away from the relationship, no matter how inconsequential the betrayal may seem at the time. Okay, Dad, as long as you promise. I'll call Ted tomorrow. Last I heard, Mr. Rizzo was selling cars up north in Dallas. What are you going to tell Ted? Let's wait until our family situation clears up. Then Ted and I can talk about our relationship. I think Ted's always wondered that himself, if he doesn't already know. Thank you. I'd like to surprise Tony Rizzo if I can. Now that the lid was off the kettle, no one wanted to waste any time. Jeb called Ted on Monday morning, and after the usual relationship clarification, found out where Ted's father worked without revealing why. Just two friends going over shit. How's your mom? How's your dad doing? What are they up to? At 3 p.m. on Tuesday, Harold Phillips knocked on the door of Tony Rizzo's sales office at the Lexus dealership where Tony worked. When Tony took his eyes off the papers on his desk, old feelings surged inside Harold, the urge to punch that asshole right in the nose. Harold. It had been over a dozen years, and Tony still couldn't think of a reason why his old neighbor was standing in his office doorway. It took Harold a moment to collect his thoughts. "Hello, Tony. I was wondering if you had a minute to talk. This is a private conversation, so maybe we could go somewhere less crowded." Tony's thoughts began to clear. "Sure, let's take the car and go for a drive." Tony grabbed a bunch of car keys and held the door open for Harold. They drove to the nearest park and got out without saying a word. Both men sat down on a bench facing a small pond. "I want to know about you and Haley." Tony was still trying to catch up. Harold's words were not what he expected. There was a look of surprise on his face. "What do you mean to me and Haley? There was never anything between me and your wife." Tony's attempted evasion pissed Harold off. "What the hell do you mean?" "Nothing. Don't mess with me, Tony. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that Jeb and Ted are brothers, and Jeb's DNA just showed it. He's half Italian, Rizzo." Although Tony found the situation funny, he was smart enough to realize that Harold wouldn't find it funny. After all, Tony had a dozen years to get used to the idea. Harold would only now find out the truth. Tony suppressed a laugh. "God, Harold, didn't you and Haley have a conversation? You weren't looking for me. At first I thought it was you sleeping with my ex, Sophia. When I saw Jeb and Ted playing together on the baseball field, I thought they must both be your sons, because I never touched your wife. In fact, I was ready to come down and kick your ass. Luckily, I picked a fight with Sophia first, told her I was gonna make you pay. That's when Sophia told me the truth. Paul Mazzetti is Ted's father. Mazzetti, the asshole who lived on the corner before he moved west." Harold was stunned. "You're telling me that Mazzetti made love to Sophia and Haley?" "Sophia didn't say if she knew anything about Haley. I think she suspected though. Sophia said that Mazzetti was probably Ted's father, because they were having an affair when she got pregnant." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you and Haley seemed happy. I thought you two had a good marriage. Hell, I thought if I'd worked things out with Ted and Jeb you probably had. And who am I to make a fuss if you don't say anything?" Harold had to think about it, but it did make sense. "Harold, I'm sorry if you think I should have said something. After I found out, I knew that Sophia and I were getting a divorce. I couldn't accept her betrayal, but I didn't want to be the cause of your divorce. Plus, let me confess to a more selfish reason. If you had been around, you could have kept a close eye on Ted, and you did. Half the reason he turned out to be a fine young man is because of your influence on him. I know that, and I'll always be grateful for it. It's true. After Rizzo's divorce and until Sophia left 3 years ago, the boys grew close, and Harold was almost a second father to Ted." Tony stared at Harold for a minute, watching him try to digest this information. "It makes you dizzy, doesn't it?" "Dizzy? I'm ready to puke. It makes me dizzy. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about beating the shit out of you. And here you are, a victim like me. I'm glad you're not one of those hotheads who barges into my office with guns drawn. Well, now I gotta find Mazzetti and talk to him." "Any idea where he went?" Tony said, "Mazzetti's dead." "Dead? How?" "Boating accident. He had too much to drink, took his boat out on Lake Mead and fell overboard. Drowned." The smile on Tony's face as he recounted Mazzetti's fate sent a chill down Harold's spine. The smile lasted only a split second on his face before it was replaced by an expression of deep concern. "A shame, really. We could probably both sue the bastard for child support or something. But in the long run it's probably better this way. I don't think either of the boys would want to hang out with an asshole who goes around seducing married women." With those words, both men got up from the park bench and headed for the car. As they drove back to the car dealership, Tony asked what had brought this on after all these years. Harold explained how DNA tests had precipitated it all, including Haley's trip to see her sister. "It's none of my business, but what are you going to do about Haley now? I guess now that Mazzetti's gone, I'll have to get answers from Haley. I was hoping to hear both sides of the story." But overall, I'm not saddened by the news that the asshole drowned. Does Ted know? No, Ted still believes I'm his father. I try to keep in touch with him, show him I care about him despite the divorce from his mom. Some days are better than others. One of us calls the other at least once every 2 weeks, Harold nodded. Jeb, knowing he's half Italian, is likely to complicate things. He thinks he's Ted's half-brother and you're his biological father. When I tell him the truth, he's bound to want more answers, and eventually it will get to Ted. You and Sophia might want to prepare yourselves. Tony was suddenly overcome with sadness. He loved Ted and didn't want that to change. Can you ask Jeb to wait a week? Give me a chance to talk to Ted? You know I will, and I know Jeb will. Good luck, Tony, and thanks. By the time Harold got in his car and drove home, he was physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. There was a sign for a chain hotel in front of one of the exits as he headed south. Harold decided to stop and rent a room for a few hours or overnight. He would decide later. With the room key in hand, Harold changed his mind about taking a nap. The gentleman's club across the street seemed to be calling his name. He hadn't been to a strip club since his bachelor party almost 30 years ago. In fact, in all those years, Harold had only seen one naked woman other than his wife. It was time to rectify that. When Harold walked into the club, he almost came back out. What the hell am I doing here? But he paid the entrance fee and sat down at the far end of the room. A waitress in a revealing suit took his drink order, and he watched a surprisingly attractive woman on stage. Harold was a little disappointed. The club wasn't completely nude. An Asian girl approached him and asked if he wanted a lap dance. Harold was tempted but refused when he was told he would be kicked out of the club if he touched her during the private dance. Damn, how could any guy sit there while some chick rubbed up against him? Several more girls danced and undressed on stage while Harold sipped his drink. All the girls did a decent job showing enthusiasm. Harold tipped each girl $5. Harold ordered a second bourbon while watching an Asian woman dance on stage. He couldn't believe a woman could bend in half like that. He walked up on stage and slipped a $10 bill. Harold couldn't take his eyes off her, and she noticed. Finishing her dance, she approached Harold a second time. We can go to the back, to a private room. We can be alone there. Harold looked at her. He looked into those eyes. Harold would never know, because instead of following the girl into the back room, he stood up, handed her another $10 bill, muttered a thank you, and walked out the door. There was a liquor store next door. Harold bought a bottle of bourbon and went to his room. The next morning, Harold woke up with a splitting headache. He looked at the clock. Damn it, it was 10:30. There was a horrible taste in his mouth. No wonder, since the last time he had brushed his teeth was yesterday morning. Harold put on pants and a t-shirt and headed for the office. He grabbed a pack of aspirin, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, and a cup of coffee before returning to his room. The shower helped, and after an hour he felt more human. He dialed Haley's number and was glad when she picked up. We need to talk. I'm at work right now. When do you want to meet? I can be home in an hour. Can you take the rest of the day off? Why do you ask? Where are you? Harold's headache was coming back, and it was making him miserable. It doesn't matter where I am. Just tell me if you can come home soon. Harold heard Haley start to cry. I'll be there. I love Harold hung up the phone. As Harold drove north on the freeway, he wondered why he was so angry after all these years. He had known for years that Jeb was not his biological son. He had always suspected that Rizzo was the father. Was part of his anger the new knowledge that Haley had slept with that fatty Mazzetti, and it was Mazzetti who had fathered Jeb? Damn, he'd always hated that asshole. Harold realized that no matter how deep you drive the feeling of being hornswoggled, those feelings always remain. I should have made love to that Asian woman last night. He said it out loud in the car, but he knew better. He had grown up and was no longer the kind of man who broke promises. After breaking his vows years ago, he promised himself to never make the same mistake again. Haley was already home when Harold pulled into the driveway. He entered the house to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Haley was sitting at the same dining room table, in the same spot where Harold had last seen her 3 days ago. So much had happened since Easter, he thought to himself as he watched Haley open a box of pastries from his favorite bakery. A payoff? Harold said with a smile in his voice. He loved this woman. Who said it was for you? Haley replied, taking a bite from a sweet roll with cream cheese. Haley's humor was one of the traits Harold loved about her, and she knew it. He appreciated her attempt to brighten the moment, but it was time to get serious. Tell me about Paul Mazzetti. Haley even flinched when Harold said the name. She was suddenly small and frightened. Could this be the end of her marriage? How did Harold know it was Paul? All these thoughts whirled through her mind. With nothing else to help her gather her thoughts, Haley stood up and poured coffee into the 2 cups in front of her. She handed 1 coffee cup and a box of brownies to Harold. Harold sat and waited without taking a sip of coffee or a bite from the cinnamon bun. Haley finally began to speak. It happened twice. I'm sorry. I'd give anything to fix it. Then I got pregnant with Jeb. I swear I thought Jeb was yours. Everyone said how much he looked like me and my brothers. That was until he started growing up and I saw Jeb and Ted together when they were in 5th grade. I still remember that horrible moment. It was during a field trip when Sophia and I were chaperones. I looked at Sophia as the 2 boys waited for the bus together. I could see it in Sophia's eyes, even though she didn't even say a word. We both knew. We had never talked about it, even after Tony dumped Sophia and filed for divorce, even after Sophia put the house on the market and left town. Harold was tired of rambling. He wanted answers. Tell me how it started. Haley looked Harold straight in the eye. When I tell you I want you to understand something, I'm not excusing my behavior or blaming anyone but myself. I also want you to know that Jeb has been your son in everything but DNA since he started growing in my belly. He is our son, yours and mine. I told Jeb the same thing Sunday night. I'm glad. He loves you and needs you. It started with Paul 6 months after Hal was born. I was still struggling with the extra pounds from pregnancy and felt fat and ugly. Harold interrupted Haley. Don't give me that. I felt fat and ugly crap. When have I ever said you weren't beautiful? Given Harold's angry outburst, Haley's response was calm, much calmer than she felt. You didn't have to say it. All you had to do was make love to that chick from work, the year you 2 maintained your affair before. And after Hal was born. If Haley had pulled out a shotgun and shot Harold in the chest, the effect of her words couldn't have been more serious. He sat there with his mouth open and just stared, not saying a word. What? Did you think I didn't know? Did you think you were so sneaky that I didn't smell love and her perfume from you when you came in late after working all evening on important projects? Harold still didn't say a word, so Haley continued. I wasn't going to cheat or settle scores. All I wanted was for you to realize that you still loved me and wanted me to be your wife, not this cheating bitch. What kind of fool would try to steal a man away from his wife who had just given birth to his young son? Paul took advantage of the situation. He was walking by the house one night. I had just gotten home and Hal was in the back seat. I had groceries in the back seat of the car and Hal was yelling at the top of his voice because he was dirty. Paul pulled over and while I was changing Hal's clothes, Paul brought the groceries. You were working late again. I invited Paul to sit and have a beer while I laid out the groceries. Paul was charming and I told him more than I should have. Paul was to Paul's credit and my downfall. He was a master seducer with his charm and pleasant looks. I was a lonely, frustrated young mom with low self-esteem. Over the next few weeks, Paul seemed to be available anytime I needed something done. Call me anytime, he said. So I did. When the garage door jammed and you were at work, Paul fixed it. When there was a foul odor coming from the furnace, Paul found a dead mouse trapped inside. And every time he came over he told me how beautiful I was. He even gave me a bunch of flowers. They sat right there on the dining room table for 4 days and you didn't even notice them. Then one day he kissed me and we made love. You want specifics? Like, was he better than you or more than you? Harold just shook his head no. He was still trying to come to grips with the fact that Haley knew about their affair, an affair with a coworker that had lasted 8 months before he ended it. He remembered why it had ended, when he felt Haley slipping away from him and realized how much he loved her. He remembered the fear when Janice Mueller threatened to call Haley and tell her all about their affair. He dodged a bullet. The affair had gone on for almost a year and his wife hadn't found out a thing. It was a secret Harold had kept for the past 20+ years. Haley wasn't finished and her words interrupted his thoughts. Okay, but I'll tell you, he was neither, not better, not more. But he was there for me when I needed a friend. Only he wasn't a real friend, just another asshole with an ego who wanted to distinguish himself. A couple days after that first time he came back and we did it again. After that second time, two things happened. First, I was so badly conscience-stricken that I cried non-stop for 2 days. Second, the next day you came home right after work and kissed me like you hadn't kissed me in almost a year. When I told you I hadn't made dinner, you took Hal and me to Sullivan's for a delicious dinner. We made love that night and every night for the next week. I was in seventh heaven. You were my husband again. I thought that was the week Jeb was conceived because it was my week. It never occurred to me that Paul was the father until the day of the tour. Was he the only one? Haley was furious and her voice rose when she answered. Yes, was Janice Mueller the only one? Heck, she even knew and remembered her name. Yes, she was, and I'm sorry. It was stupid of me and it's the one thing I'm most ashamed of in my entire life. Well, I guess that makes two of us. What do we do now? I know you've always hated Paul, and now you know that we had an affair, however brief, and that he's Jeb's biological father. Can you even look at me after that? I still love you, Haley. I still want to be your husband and your friend and your lover. I want us to grow old together. I'm not naive. There may be some consequences after this, maybe a few fights, but I want you to come home tonight. Haley got up from her chair and sat on Harold's lap. She put her arms around his neck and kissed him. Take me to bed, and he did. Epilogue. After they made love, they got up and ordered Thai food for dinner. Harold and Haley sat on the back porch eating spring rolls, green curry and pad thai. They drank a nice Pinot Gris and talked. Harold, please tell me you're not going to do something stupid and go after Paul right now. Haley, do me a favor and stop calling him Paul. Call him Mazzetti or asshole, but not Paul. And to answer your question, no, I'm not going after him. I can't because Mazzetti's dead. Dead? How do you know that? Because Tony Rizzo told me that Mazzetti died in a boating accident. Tony told you? You don't think so? I don't know and I don't care. But not everybody whose name ends in a vowel gets in the mob. So just talk.
Now start second story.
Sometimes it seems that someone cursed a person, because he steps on the same race time after time, and each time does not learn a valuable lesson from it. Unfortunately, many people make the same mistake, and this also applies when choosing partners. Someone specifically enters into a relationship with someone who can change him. Arnold Prentice helped his wife Terry into their low-slung 2015 Corvette. The new models are out, he hinted as he slid into the driver's seat. He drove out of the parking lot of Dr. Farbacker's medical office, and headed north on Highway 19 toward Elgin, Louisiana. Terry clung to his arm, giggling with delight. Let's see, you're 66 now, ooh, Terry teased. That means you'll be 84 when she graduates high school. Arnold corrected me with a smile. The 29-year-old woman suddenly had a thought. You're happy, right? She asked. You do want the baby, don't you? He had assured her he was thrilled at the possibility when she first shared her suspicions. He had reassured her when making the appointment with Dr. Mark Farbacker, and again, while they waited for the results in the young doctor's office. But now, the attractive brunette looked uncertain. 64-year-old Arnold Prentice first encountered 27-year-old Terry Huval at a fundraiser for St. Anne's Animal Shelter. Terry was a volunteer and Arnold was one of the donors. Arnold couldn't have cared less if every animal in St. Anne Parish perished the next day. However, as a businessman he understood that a $1,000 donation could translate into tens of thousands of dollars in goodwill and positive public relations. Terry was well aware of her attractiveness. She'd been told so all her life. With her sweet smile, large brown doe-like eyes and ample curves, she drew the attention of the few donors who attended the wine and cheese event. While they made small talk and dropped a few $100s into her collection bucket, their eyes rarely strayed above her low-cut top. Then Arnold approached and dropped a $5,000 check into her bucket. That generous contribution earned him her phone number and a date. He took her to Henry's, an exclusive French restaurant in LJ. After dinner, they enjoyed a helicopter tour of the Atchafalaya Basin, followed by a visit to his large home, where they ended the evening in bed. Arnold Jerome Prentice wasn't an unattractive man, but he wasn't particularly appealing either. His features were somewhat pinched, his hair was a dull gray, and his brown eyes were narrow and harsh. His chest was sunken, his belly protruded, and his legs were thin and spindly. If Arnold Prentice had hit the wall with his manhood, his sharp nose would have hit the wall first. Terry was no stranger to intimacy when she found herself in Arnold's spacious bed. Before that, she was with 4 men and 2 women. All the men did what Arnold Prentice did. Less than a year after the fundraiser, Arnold proposed to Terry. She accepted. Now, as they drove north on Highway 19, Terry asked Arnold again if he was happy to have a baby. The car was crossing Highway 52. Suddenly, an 18-wheeled truck appeared behind their powerful car. Arnold's heart sank when he noticed another 18-wheeled truck in the south lane, also heading north. Ahead on the narrow road he could make out 2 dark specks. For 7 miles between Highway 52 and Highway 54, there were almost no curbs on this section of Highway 19. There were deep drainage ditches on both sides of the narrow road. Damn, 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 Arnold cursed as the 18-wheeled truck behind them crept even closer to their bumper. Terry looked around in confusion. She saw a large truck behind them, and another truck moving in the oncoming lane almost parallel to them. 2 dark specks were approaching them ahead. Arnold jabbed the button for the Bluetooth connection on the dashboard. Yes. A harsh voice interrupted Arnold's classical music. She's supposed to be heading south, Arnold snapped. We're going north, I'm in the car. Oh. The voice sounded amused. Call it off, Arnold demanded. Call it off? Why, Arnold, why? Terry's voice trembled as realization dawned. Because, you idiot, I had a vasectomy 20 years ago, Arnold yelled. Sorry, Mr. Prentice, that's not possible, the man chuckled. Listen, damn it, I'll pay double, Arnold shouted. It's not about the money, Mr. Prentice, the man's voice turned cold. It's about my sister. Remember Gloria? She drowned, Arnold cried. It was an accident. She drowned, for God's sake. But there was only a cold metallic click in response. Arnold would have admired the precision of the choreography. When the 4 tractor trailers came to a halt, there was less than a foot of space between their front bumpers. The first tractor, traveling south in the wrong lane, reversed, rolling over the wrecked 2015 Corvette that had slid beneath it. The driver kept the trailer steady, and then moved behind the other southbound tractor. The northbound tractor moved forward, further crushing the remains. The northbound tractor in the wrong lane then reversed, swerved into the correct lane, and also ran over the remains of the unfortunate vehicle. The driver of the second, now northbound tractor, stopped again just past the scattered debris. Darren Ladeau, who had been losing his battle with heroin addiction, was now asleep against the passenger window of the tractor. The driver reached over, pulled Darren into the driver's seat and climbed down. Huh. Darren muttered. The driver got into the second southbound tractor, nodded to his partner, and the partner sounded his horn. The first southbound tractor trailer started moving, followed by the second. The entire sequence took less than 4 minutes from the time Arnold and Terry had crossed Highway 52 to the moment Eric Rodriguez, Gloria's brother, radioed in to report seeing a tractor trailer running over a sports car. Darren Ladeau would later be charged with vehicular homicide, but would die from untreated hepatitis before the trial began. Barbara Hinton drove her 1978 Z28 to the Hinton Chevrolet dealership again. Her Boston 8-track tape was stuck once more. Her father claimed she forced it in too hard, but Barbara knew that wasn't the case. Got stuck again? Asked Zeke, the head mechanic, as Barbara carefully stepped out of the car, her weight of 247 pounds shifting with her. Yeah, and it wasn't my fault, Barbara replied before Zeke could suggest otherwise. Hey, it happens, Zeke said with a shrug. Arnold Prentice was a new salesman at the dealership, but at 28, he was already gaining a reputation. He was a driven salesman who knew how to persuade customers into adding those extra options that increased the price of their new car. Hey there, while Zeke's working on your car, how about taking a look at some of our other vehicles? Arnold suggested to the overweight 18-year-old. Barbara gave him a sly smile. I'm Barbara. My dad owns this place, she said confidently. I know, Arnold replied with a smile. I saw your picture on his desk. He took her chubby hand and placed it on his arm, leading her away from the service area. Just needed an excuse to talk to you, Arnold admitted. By the time Arnold and Barbara had finished checking out some of the flashy conversion vans, the love vans on the lot, Zeke had already removed her Boston tape and left it on the passenger seat. Hey, Boston is playing at the Biloxi Amphitheater next Thursday, Arnold said. Wanna go? Glenn and Peggy Hinton strictly forbade their 18-year-old daughter from attending the concert with a 28-year-old man. It was a school night, she was only 18 and he was much too old for her. But Barbara defied them, sneaking out of the house to meet Arnold at the corner. He borrowed a van from his neighbor and took with him plants, natural gifts. The concert was loud and wild. Barbara Reed tasted beer and plants for the first time, and at a gas station on I-10 at 3:41 a.m., she engaged in intimacy for the first time. Barbara was grounded for a month, and Glenn seriously considered firing the cocky salesman. But Arnold's sales numbers were too good to justify it. 2 months after the Boston concert, Barbara revealed she was pregnant. The wedding was arranged in a hurry, and Glenn gave them a honeymoon in Hawaii. Arnold was convinced that the honeymoon in Hawaii was intended as a punishment. Being intimate with a 250-kilogram girl in the back seat of a dark van while drunk was quite difficult and turned into a real torment. During their honeymoon, Barbara learned a lot. She also discovered her addiction to alcohol as Arnold was constantly giving her drinks. If she had fainted from drinking too much, he might have been able to avoid intimacy with her. Fat, drunk, tanned, and happy with life, Barbara moved into a small apartment that Arnold rented. Within a month of the wedding, Barbara pestered her father, persuaded him to take out a mortgage loan. By the time she gave birth to Edward Jerome Prentice, her weight had skyrocketed from 247 to 310 pounds. From the moment Eddie cried for the first time, Arnold felt love and a deep connection with another person. The child was perfect, with a shock of dark curly hair, long eyelashes, and a chubby cherubic face. Glenn and Peggy were equally devoted to their first grandson. Suddenly, Barbara felt hurt and angry. She was the only child of Glenn and Peggy, and she was the center of their attention all her life. She was always the one they doted on, coddled and pampered. Barbara kept eating and drinking, and by the time Eddie turned 1, she weighed 338 pounds. Arnold continued to dominate sales, consistently outperforming his colleagues at Hinton Chevrolet, selling several more cars each month than anyone else. So, Prentice, what's your secret? Asked an older, more experienced salesman. Simple, I don't care, Arnold replied. I don't care about their petty little problems, their mortgages, high-interest loans, or how many kids they have. The only thing I care about is making sure they drive out of here in one of my cars. 2 days after Eddie's 4th birthday, Glenn had his first heart attack. His second heart attack left the once big, burly, and outgoing man, a shadow of his former self, reduced to a mumbling, drooling, shuffling figure. It was then that Arnold approached Glenn and Peggy with an offer to buy Hinton Chevrolet from them. By this point, Glenn and Peggy still hadn't warmed up to the brash man, even though he was the father of their beloved grandson. But selling the dealership would finally give them the freedom to pursue the things they had been putting off. 2 months after Hinton Chevrolet was rebranded as Prentice Chevrolet, Glenn experienced his third and final heart attack. Arnold held his wife's trembling hand as she cried deeply. He consoled her, comforted her, and even made love to her the night following her father's funeral. Peggy struggled to cope with the death of her husband, her first and only love. Less than a month after his passing, Peggy drank a glass of white wine and took a handful of sleeping pills. By the time the bottle was empty, she had swallowed all the pills. The housekeeper found Peggy the next morning lying on her bed with a photograph of Glenn Hinton in her hand. It was a photo of Glenn Hinton in his high school football uniform from a time when he had been a strikingly handsome young man. Arnold made arrangements for Peggy to be buried with that photograph. He once again held her hand, provided comfort as she wept, and he once more made love to her. 3 weeks after Eddie's 5th birthday, Barbara, weighing 391 pounds, was in their kitchen indulging in a gallon of Blue Bell strawberries and cream ice cream while little Eddie, with his curly hair, played outside. "Hi," said a smiling man. "Have you seen my puppy?" Arnold did not hold his wife's hand at their beloved child's funeral. He did not comfort her. He did not make love to her. At 412 pounds, Barbara Margaret Hinton Prentice decided to start a diet. She bought diet pills and stocked up on fresh fruits and vegetables. After a month of her severe diet, she had only lost 17 pounds. She increased her water intake, doubled her dose of diuretics and diet pills, and almost entirely cut out food. By the end of the following month, she had lost 53 pounds. However, she couldn't enjoy her appearance. Her vision was deteriorating, her hair was falling out in patches, and a severe rash was developing on her neck and chest. Someone suggested laxatives and sea salt enemas. Arnold Prentice came home after his usual 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. workday. He realized he hadn't seen or heard from Barbara in a few days. With Prentice Chevrolet closed on Sundays, he couldn't even recall if he had seen her the previous Sunday. "Barbara," he called out. Entering her bedroom, he saw the unmade bed and frowned. He disliked messy beds. "Barbara," he called again. He braced himself and opened the bathroom door, a place he found particularly unpleasant due to his aversion to other people's bathroom habits. When he bought Hinton Chevrolet, one of the first things he did was install a private bathroom in his office. "Barbara," he called, not wanting to step into the bathroom. "Arnold," Barbara gurgled weakly, slumped against the wall by the commode. Arnold called for an ambulance. The University Medical Center in Lafayette, Louisiana sent a team, and the paramedics struggled to get the severely dehydrated Barbara onto the gurney. Unfortunately, in the process her heart failed and she died before they could even get her out of the bathroom. Arnold J. Prentice excelled in his role as a mourning widower. As the spouse of Glenn and Peggy Hinton's only child, he reaped significant benefits from his portrayal. He remained single for 4 years. This doesn't imply celibacy, but none of his visitors stayed beyond a few nights. In 1988, Arnold encountered Gloria Rodriguez while she was searching for an affordable, dependable car. The 22-year-old woman had long black hair that cascaded down to her ankles, though it did little to conceal her attractive figure as she bent over to inspect the car's price tag. When Gloria stood up, her displeased expression became evident, and her ample chest caught the eye of the salesperson approaching her. Arnold had noticed Gloria first and quickly intervened, intercepting Dale Green before he could approach her. Despite not having been on the sales floor for years, Arnold immediately switched into sales mode. While Dale occupied himself with showing a pickup truck to a young couple, Arnold launched into a full sales pitch. They got married 6 months after Gloria Rodriguez first visited his car dealership, and Arnold even took a week off from work for their honeymoon. Hawaii was a grueling trip with a morbidly obese woman, but it was a real joy with a 22-year-old girl with a tan body, perfect for a bright yellow swimsuit. If Gloria noticed that her husband looked out of place on the beach, and that he didn't belong in public unless he was dressed in a formal suit, she kept her thoughts to herself. She retained the role of a loving, attentive and flirtatious wife in relation to her husband, who had aged significantly at that time. After retiring to their hotel room, Gloria demonstrated her abilities in bed. Arnold, unaware that she was pretending, sincerely believed that she was enjoying intimacy. 7 months after their wedding, Gloria was at the breakfast table enjoying her usual waffles with strawberry preserves when she suddenly rushed from the table. She barely made it to the bathroom before her coffee and 3 bites of waffle came up. Arnold, repulsed, pushed his own breakfast away and quickly left for work. He called Gloria at lunchtime, and she reassured him that she was feeling better. The next morning, she only managed a few bites before becoming ill again. This time, Arnold made the connection and eagerly contacted Dr. Morris, the OBGYN who had assisted Barbara with Eddie's birth. "But I'm on the pill," Gloria protested. "Accidents happen," Arnold replied, clearly pleased. At Dr. Morris's office, the doctor conducted a routine physical, took blood samples, and promised to provide the results the next day. While in the office, Gloria started to cough, a dry, persistent cough. "Sweetheart," she croaked to Arnold. "Could you get me some water?" Arnold stood up and left the room. He then put his ear to the door. "Doctor, is there any way to tell the baby's race?" Arnold overheard. He got a cup of water from the dispenser and brought it back to the office. "Thank you, sweetheart," Gloria said with a smile. Arnold took his seat and noticed that Dr. Morris was having difficulty meeting his gaze. In contrast, Gloria had no trouble looking him in the eye. "Like I said, we should have the results tomorrow. Please call me in the morning, okay?" Dr. Morris said, clearing his throat. 4 days later, Arnold held a tearful Gloria as she told him about the miscarriage she had experienced. Her tears were sincere. Gloria was a Catholic and considered terminating a pregnancy a grave sin. But her fear of Arnold went beyond the usual. He was rich, powerful, and truly sociopathic by nature. She noticed that Arnold Prentice was completely devoid of empathy. Arnold hugged his wife while she mourned the loss of their child, but he did not show tears. Instead, he made her a cup of chamomile tea, into which he crushed the 4 Valium tablets that Barbara gave him. "Here, honey," he said softly. "This will help you sleep." His soothing tone should have alerted Gloria. She took the tea and drank it, noticing the teaspoon of honey he had added. After finishing her cup and refusing the second one, she tried to get up from the couch, but her legs gave way and she stumbled. "Come on, honey," he said cheerfully. "Maybe a little fresh air will do you good." "Arnie, it's cold in here," she muttered as the fresh March wind blew over them. She resisted when he started undressing her. "Arnie, we're outside," she protested weakly. "I just had a miscarriage. I'm not in the mood." "I'll do anything you want, just not this." Arnold escorted the mumbling, stumbling woman to the swimming pool. "Arnie, it's too cold." "I don't want to swim," she complained. The icy water did revive her a bit. But in her drugged state, she was unable to resist as Arnold, fully clothed, jumped in and pushed her underwater. He stood on her long flowing hair, keeping her submerged. By this point, she was fully conscious and struggling to reach the surface. But his weight on her hair kept her pinned down. She twisted and turned, desperately trying to escape. Her final sight was his impassive face as he watched the light fade from her eyes. Arnold kept his wife submerged by her long, beautiful hair until he could no longer bear the biting cold. When he couldn't tolerate it any longer, he dragged Gloria by her hair to the steps and pulled her out of the water. Leaving a trail of water through the house, he went to the kitchen phone and dialed O for the operator. April Boudreau has applied for the position of Arnold J.'s personal assistant, Prentice. She was an energetic, plump 19-year-old girl with long brown hair, big brown eyes, and a beautiful figure. She couldn't type at all. And because of her strong Cajun accent, she was difficult to understand not only for Arnold, but also for many of his clients. Despite these difficulties, the young woman showed great interest in bed life, and even taught Arnold Prentice a lot. 4 months after being hired, a petite 4'11" girl walked into Arnold's office, closed the door and turned to face him. "So I got pregnant. What are we going to do about it?" "What is it?" she asked. Arnold asked her to marry him, and April stared at him for a long time. "I made one mistake and I'm not going to make another," she replied. "How do I even know that this is my child?" Arnold objected, upset by her refusal. "How do you know that's not true?" she objected. April stopped working for Arnold that day. 6.5 months later, she gave birth to Robin Michael Boudreau. Arnold saw the baby 3 days after his birth, and was certain that he was the father. Robin had the same long eyelashes and dark curly hair as Edward Prentice, and even his cries resembled Eddie's wails. Yet April still refused to marry Arnold. Savannah Mortensen entered Arnold's life in the same way April had, by applying for the job of personal assistant. She was a tall, slender beauty with long red hair and voluptuous breasts. While the hair was dyed and the breasts were surgically enhanced, Arnold didn't mind either alteration. Since April was costing Arnold $1,200 a month, Arnold and Savannah agreed they didn't want children. Arnold had a vasectomy, and Savannah took care of him during his recovery. The 24-year-old beauty smiled as Arnold complained about his discomfort, contemplating whether to tell him that she had already had her tubes tied on her 21st birthday. She decided it wasn't worth mentioning. After all, it was in the past. Savannah had no desire for children. She had never liked them, and she resented Robin Boudreau, Arnold's son. A vasectomy guaranteed that once Robin was out of the picture, Arnold's wealth would belong to her alone. Removing Arnold would be a piece of cake. He suffered from diabetes mellitus, took insulin orally daily, but did not exclude sugar or carbohydrates from his diet, insisting that this was the purpose of insulin. He also had high blood pressure, but refused to reduce his sodium intake. He also struggled with high cholesterol, and often joked that his blood was as thick as toothpaste. When April saw the coldness in Savannah's eyes, she decided not to leave her son alone with her. Arnold didn't mind. He didn't have much time for the child, due to his busy schedule running his car empire. Since Louisiana relaxed its laws by allowing Arnold to work on Sundays, he typically worked 7 days a week. Savannah was fine with that. Not having to look after her husband's unpleasant child or spend time with Arnold allowed her to do what she loved, spend his money. One of her expenses, which Arnold fully paid for, was Savannah's love of silk underwear. Arnold wholeheartedly supported Savannah's decision to increase her breasts from a 36-inch size to a G size. The same experienced surgeon also increased the volume of her lips with collagen, tightened the skin on her neck and larynx, and performed a chemical peeling. Arnold spent several $1,000s on cosmetic repairs for his wife, but it took weeks before the tumor subsided enough for him to assess the changes. "Damn it, I could buy a new TV with this money," Arnold grumbled when Savannah refused to make love to him for the first time. "Yes, but the new TV wears out sooner or later," Savannah replied smugly, "but this breast is forever." In 2004, the day after Robin's 11th birthday, Savannah had another operation. Nothing serious, but she had an adverse reaction to the anesthesia. Even after his wife's death, Arnold did not devote time to his child. He just kept paying April alimony every month. Robin's father proudly told the young man that he hadn't attended college himself, yet had managed to make a name for himself. Robin Boudreau acknowledged this, but reassured his father that a combination of textbook knowledge and natural skill would benefit both him and his father. Arnold provided very little support and assistance to his son, and his resentment seemed to grow. Since Robin was attending college, Arnold had to keep sending April his hard-earned money. At least Robin had come to accept that Arnold was too busy to spend time with him. Arnold did acknowledge Robin's graduation from the University of Louisiana at DeGard with a degree in business administration, though he did not attend the ceremony. There was no graduation gift, check, watch, or cufflinks from him. Instead, there was a voicemail from April, gleefully announcing that her time with Arnold Jerome Prentice's financial support had come to an end. "Arnold, really?" Terry had snapped, her pretty face showing her displeasure. "What?" Arnold retorted at his wife. "It's not your damned money." "No, but that's our child," Terry replied. "Seriously, is this how you're going to treat him?" Arnold sneered, grabbing his crotch. "Ain't nothing but boys in these boys," he said, conveniently ignoring the fact that he had a vasectomy. A few weeks after their minor disagreement, Arnold looked across Highway 19 with irritation. New construction was causing a lot of dust and debris. Every evening after the workers had stopped their heavy machinery, Arnold had to hire 4 college girls to stand out in the summer heat to wash and wax his cars, removing the day's dust and grime. The 4 cheerleaders from ULD drew attention as they washed and waxed the cars, playfully squirting each other while flaunting their string bikinis. Despite the distraction, it was an expense Arnold would have preferred to avoid. A few weeks after the construction started, it wrapped up. Then a sign was erected, and a steady stream of trucks began arriving. "What the hell?" Arnold shouted as he saw Boudreau Ford in bold letters. At 22, Robin lacked the experience required to qualify for a Ford franchise. But his mother, April Boudreau, did. She eagerly completed all the necessary paperwork, signed the documents, and then appointed Robin as the general manager. "Hi, Dad. Are you here to test drive one of the Mustangs?" Robin greeted Arnold cheerfully as he stormed into the brand new showroom. "You son of a bitch," Arnold spat out venomously at his son. "Really? Mom always refers to me as you son of a bastard." Robin responded with a smile. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're going to lose. I'll crush you like the insect you are, do you hear me?" Arnold yelled. "Who's that?" Arnold heard a customer ask one of the attractive saleswomen. "That? That's Prentice. He owns the place across the street, the young blonde chuckled. Wanna buy a car from him? Arnold gritted his teeth and glared at his son before turning and storming out of the showroom. See you. Come again, Robin called out, then turned to welcome a potential customer who had arrived just as Arnold was leaving. Arnold watched as each potential sale drove away from Boudreaux Ford, feeling the sting of every car that left the lot. Though his own sales were still strong, he perceived every transaction across the street.